Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Olathe Board of Education to order for December 6th. Board of Education members, please note that we've had a little change in the technology tonight. Our microphones are live without having to touch them. So as you're having discussions, please know that your microphones are alive and recording and announcing as we're here. Good idea, Mr. Poland. With that, turn it over to Dr. All. Oh, I'm sorry. Mrs. Carpenter, please call the roll.
Ms. Ashton?
Here.
Mr. Churchman?
Here.
Dr. Daniels?
Here.
Mr. Gilmore?
Here.
Mr. Parker?
Here.
Mr. Poland?
Here.
Mrs. Wilhelm?
Here.
And we have a quorum to do our meeting tonight, conduct our business. It's our first order of business, our Pledge of Allegiance. And now I will turn it over to Dr. All to introduce our special guests.
Yes, we have students representing Central Elementary School here. I'm going to have them come forward to lead us in our pledge, and then I will tell you a little bit about them, and they'll tell us who's with them as well. So would you come forward? Gracie's leading the way. She's the student council president.
Would you all stand, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to tell you, I think that is the best pledge of allegiance I have ever heard from a first grader in my life. The first person I'm going to tell you about, we get a little camera out here. You know, we got to get Mom out here. I told her to just tell. The first person I want to tell you about, very special person, is Lexi Capps, and she's in first grade with Mrs. Clark at Central Elementary School. She is an especially enthusiastic first grader, learning to read both Braille and words simultaneously. So she has a big job because she has to learn two languages almost at the same time. And so she's a very smart little girl, and she's doing really well. Lexi loves to run and skip in her classroom. And actually, I saw her I think she was trying to run down the hall a few weeks ago when I was over there, because I heard a teacher trying to get her to slow down. She loves to ride her bike at home, and she meets life with a big, giant smile. Is that right? That's right. Okay. You want to tell us who's here with you?
My mommy, my brother, and our friend named Tom.
Okay, would they stand up, please? Mom here. Thank you very much. Okay, you can come stand by me here. We'll let somebody else come up. And our next student is Josie Summers, and she is in grade 5 with Mrs. Kempkin, and she's a very dependable student, and her principal says she's a wonderful role model, and she received exceeds standards on both her math and her reading scores from last year. And so we appreciate having Josie here. And do you have someone with you today, Josie?
Yeah, my brother and sister, Eli and Lizzie, and my dad.
Okay, would you please stand? Dad? And then we have our student council president. Stand right here. And our student council president is Gracie Funk, and she's in grade 6. And she is an excellent artist, and we're having our elementary art fair here tonight, and an excellent student as well as a leader at Central Elementary School. And so I appreciate her leadership there. We appreciate her as well as a student. And I also want to thank the school principal. I think you're going to introduce the school principal, aren't you?
Yes, she is.
Where did give her name?
Miss Stephanie Dansko, I believe.
And do you have family with us?
Yes, my mother.
Okay. You want to stay? Okay, Lexi. Thank you.
Well, ladies, thank you very much for helping us with our Pledge of Allegiance tonight. With that, Dr. All, would you please provide us with an overview of our meeting agenda, and then we'll move into our information presentations.
We're going to begin the evening with several presentations. The first one is on transitioning students from elementary to middle and junior high to senior high, and that's been a project that we've been working on to make those excellent opportunities for kids. Following that, we're going to do our bond finance information for the first issuance, and we also have our financial advisors here this evening that will participate in that as well. Our third presentation is on our strategic plan to implement the bullying policy that we have in place, and we have representatives here. Following that, we'll have our comfort break at about 6:30 to 6:45. There's also an elementary art exhibit reception during that time, so we'll have quite a few more guests, I think, even with the weather going on out there. We will be doing recognitions and awards tonight, and those will be identified as they come forward, as well as receiving public comments at about 7 p.m. Following public comments, the board will address their action items, beginning with the consent agenda that represent matters the board may approve without detailed discussion. And any item on the consent agenda may be removed for separate discussion as an action item upon request by the superintendent or any board member. And prior supporting information on all items have been provided to the board. Then we address action on bids, contracts, and agreements, and those will be identified as they come forward by the board president. Under other action items, there is a proposal for a City of Olathe partnership that will be discussed this evening and acted on later in the evening. And following that, there will be action on the adoption of the strategic plan for bullying. There's potential sale of property of our former PLC facility that the board will consider. And tonight, the board will take action on their 2008 legislative positions. And along with that, there are additional action items on easements and a quality water measure agreement. The board has received quite a few number of future action items where they begin to get their information on items that will take action by the board at some point in the future. There are additional written reports that the board president will outline. And following that, the board will begin a study session for board goals and processes tonight, but will delay the interaction and input until January. So we will spread that over 2 meetings, and then there will be an executive session, and the reasons for that will be identified at the time that the board motion is made. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. All. Item 2.01 is the first information presentation item on our agenda tonight regarding transitioning students from elementary to middle, junior high to senior high. And I believe, Dr. All, you're going to make some introductory remarks on this before the presentation.
I just wanted to mention that one of the areas that we wanted to focus on as a result of all of our studies about elementary, middle schools, and high schools is wherever that transition is an important time in students' lives whenever we make any kind of change. And some of the work of the design teams last year identified things that we could do in that area regardless of what levels those are at. And so we wanted to share with the board that we have been working on that and going along with the best practices that we wanted to enhance and continue forward. So Dr. Vanikowski?
Great, thank you, Dr. Hall, and members of the board. As Dr. Hall indicated, when we were studying the preliminary 6-9 design, and the committee was looking at that, and we had our many brochures that we had, we looked at the importance of transitions. As we were looking at all the 5 areas that we were charged to look at, from students and parents' welcome to ongoing emotional support, we also determined that we would want to say in our design that we're going to have a comprehensive transition program for all students in all schools. Well, certainly we know that those transitions are occurring no matter what our configuration is. So we have been working on that transition area, as Dr. All said, from grade 6 to middle school and grade 9 to their new school for their high school, senior high careers. As we have looked at that, we know that there are many reasons to focus on transitions, and one of them is because there are worries about transitions on the part of students and parents and staff. And
The 8th grader's gonna push me around.
The lockers.
Being called names and being shoved into a locker.
Well, we certainly know locker is a big area, as you have heard from that little clip that we had from one of the schools that we were studying. But we also know from research there's a lot of concerns by students, some of those founded and many unfounded, but areas that we have to, such as the fear of a bigger school. We also know from research that parents have concerns about the transition, whatever that transition year might be for them. And we know how important parent involvement is, so we want to address those concerns and those transitions. You'll hear a little bit more about our data from our students in a little bit. Another reason that we focused on transitions, and we've been reading a lot and doing a lot of research, both in the design team but also this school year, is that we know that the data is clear that the smoother a transition is, whatever that grade level of transition is, the better our students are going to succeed. And so that's why transitions are so important. We came to some conclusions about transitions, and as you look at those four, there's nothing rocket science there about transitions. But probably number 3 was very important to us. There were 3 audiences we needed to focus on: students, parents and families, and staff in a transition. And there also was a difference between transition activities and a comprehensive transition program. And I'll share that a little bit as we go on. As we looked at the literature that talked about the importance of comprehensive transitions, we had to ask ourselves the question, how can we build on what we're already doing? We're doing a lot of transition activities. We have tours, for example, for our incoming 6th graders, and we have parent nights for students as they're enrolling for their 10th grade year. We're doing a lot of that. So we tried to look at the research and say, what was the difference between just the many activities that are wonderful that have been going on, and how could we build upon that? Well, what we determined, there were 6 overarching kind of aspects that we needed to consider as we developed our own transition programs at each of our schools. So they might look different at each school, but they would all include these 6 aspects. And you can see many of those we've talked about. For example, relationships is very important. We need to make sure we build in activities that help us develop relationships between students to students and students to adults. Certainly another one that we talked a lot about is number 6, and that is long term. Transition doesn't happen the day you come to school for the very first time in a new school. Transition begins that year before. And so we've been spending a lot of time talking about the little elements that you might include the year before, whether in our case the 6th grade year or the 9th grade year, what kind of activities should we include? So those are the overarching areas that we had looked at. We have many exciting examples in the district, and I get really excited when I hear about a lot of these, but we also decided we couldn't bring you every one of these from every one of our schools that are doing activities for transitioning out there. I'd highlighted just a couple. We have some schools, for example, that have brought in some real lockers to the 6th grade, because that was a number 1 area of concern for many students was lockers, and I can't possibly undo a locker in the amount of time I've been provided. So some of our schools have brought in some real lockers. Another one I thought was really exciting is some of our elementary schools have actually done an elementary pen pal from elementary to elementary that will eventually funnel into the junior high together as 7th graders. So they get to know each other before that very first half day. I thought that was a great example. Oregon Trail created a video called Day in the Life of a 7th grader, so students would have an opportunity there. Olathe North is going out and doing pre-enrollment actually at the junior high sites, so parents will have some comfort with their current junior high site as they ease in that transition to get to the senior high school. Well, we knew we couldn't bring you every school, but we wanted to bring you a few schools, and we're going to have just a few examples of some of the transition activities, some of which are new that we've been working on this year, and we have a few people to share with you. The first one is Tanya Channel from Ravenwood Elementary, and she's going to talk a little bit about how we've been getting our own data on what are concerns for our parents and our students. Tanya.
Well, I think we all know that the 6th graders have worries about going to 7th grade, and some of those are kind of crazy when you as an adult. But the thing we've learned as principals and educators is any worry that a kid has is never an unnecessary worry, and so we take them all really seriously. So we did a survey of our 6th graders and of our 6th grade parents just to see what are your worries, and we had them rank those worries in order. And it was interesting to know that the number 1 worry of the 6th graders and their parents was homework. And I don't know if that's too much or not enough, because I hadn't, it said homework on my survey, so I may have to go through that a little bit more. But I think it's probably too much and not being able to keep up with it. And that was the number 1 worry. The second highest worry with our students was, what if I'm late to class? And so I think they're thinking, they've got this great big school and they've got to get everywhere, and they're very, very worried about being late to class. Whereas the parents' second greatest worry was peer pressure. And a really, very good worry with no matter what grade your kids are in. You're going to worry about peer pressure. So several of the schools have done similar surveys, and I think our data is looking pretty much the same as what the greatest worries are of the students and of the parents. So now that we have those worries, we know what to do. We know exactly where to go with this, and so that's kind of where we're at right now.
Great, thank you, Mrs. Channel. So that was one way that quite a number of schools have done surveys of both parents and staff. Some folks have done focus groups as well. And another example of an opportunity to gather input and have questions answered is being handled at Arbor Creek. So they're going to talk a little bit about that. And we have Dr. Melanie DeMoss and one of her teachers, Sarah Williams.
We're very excited about one of the projects that we have going on at Arbor Creek to help with the transition piece to junior high, and it's called Ask a Wildcat. We have tapped into the leadership class that is at Chisholm Trail, and we're actually going to start asking our sixth graders, and actually that has already started taking place, where they're going to write actually a letter. It's almost going to be a Dear Abby piece, if you will, where they'll start asking and saying, this is what I'm worried about. Can you answer this question for me? What can you tell me? And then the leadership class at Chisholm Trail is going to respond back to those students through a letter or through some other means. And we've even talked about maybe even having some of those kids come over from Chisholm Trail from that leadership class and actually talk with our kids about those worries, concerns, and fears.
So there's another example of trying to determine what our students and our parents have needs and concerns and worries about. A second area that we've been working on is helping with vertical alignment, making sure that teachers can be able to articulate what's happening at the next level. We've done this both at the 6th grade and at the 9th grade, where we're having opportunities for our teachers to get to know more about that next level program so they can answer those concerns right there. Sarah Williams from Arbor Creek is going to talk to us a little bit about an opportunity that we've had at Arbor Creek for teachers to get to know a little bit more about, in this case, Chisholm Trail.
I had the opportunity a few weeks ago to shadow a student at Chisholm Trail, and it allowed me to see not only the day in the life of a student, but also a day in the life of the teachers there, and be able to take that back to my class and talk to my students about what changes we can make or things I can guide them to do to better prepare them for middle school so they're not as intimidated by those experiences they're going to have. And it also allows us to continue to guide our students to self-question and the importance of cooperative learning and self-motivation.
Great examples. We also have had examples where the Prairie Trail area had all of their 6th grade students coming up for portions of the day, learn more about teaming, for example, so they can talk to their parents as well as their students. Another area that's very important that we talked about in the literature is developing relationships. And Prairie Center, Natalie Brown, the principal at Prairie Center, is going to talk a little bit about some of the activities they have in their feeder area to help develop those relationships.
One of the things that we have done, all of the feeder elementaries have gotten together with the principals over at Oregon Trail, and we've tried to find out what would be a great way to try and develop those relationships between the students and staff and the other students that go to Oregon Trail. And so what we came up with is Oregon Trail is providing t-shirts for all of the 6th graders that feed into Oregon Trail, and then they are going to have specific spirit nights where Prairie Center, their 6th graders will come and they'll put on their Tiger Pride shirt and go to a basketball game. And then, it'll be Clearwater Creek's turn. So there'll be different evenings that we have designated where the students will get to go to our Oregon Trail and get to know the staff there and the students and do something in a fun way to build relationships.
Example. Many other examples, but just one. And we also know from the literature that we need to make our first day of school for students as they're making this transition very exciting for them, and we need to support them throughout the year. So we're going to have a little conversation about mentoring and some student mentoring and exciting first days. And we have Pioneer Trail, who has been implementing a new pilot program this year, actually piloting for us, and Carrie Ficken from Prairie Trail and from Pioneer Trail. Pioneer Trail is going to share with us a little bit as well. She'll introduce the students with her.
Good evening. It's very exciting for me to talk about this program. Our transition program we're piloting is called WEB, Where Everybody Belongs. This program involves 9th graders as mentor students to our incoming 7th graders. We select these students in the spring through teacher invitation, and then also invite all students that sound like they might be interested in this and do an application process. From that, then we determine who we got about 40 web leaders this year, and then we'll assigned 7th graders to those web leaders. I brought one of my strongest web leaders with me tonight. She is a dynamic leader and has done an excellent job with this program. So she's going to talk to you a little bit about our training before the first day, that first day, and just a snippet on the academic follow-up. And this is Chloe Boudreau.
Hi. Like she said, in about 3rd quarter and 8th grade, we got a letter saying to meet at lunch about web, and we learned a little bit about it, and whoever was interested wrote their name on a postcard, which we would get in the middle of summer. And about 2 days before school started, we were to go to school and learn how to make the 7th graders more comfortable. And so when we were there, we learned like little activities and name games and stuff like that. And we were also given a piece of paper with about 12 people's names on it, and we had their phone numbers, their address, and their birthdays on it. And our assignment before school started was to call them and get them all pumped up to come to school, and to remind them like you didn't have to bring your backpack because all we were going to play was games and stuff. And one of my kids had a really proper name, like Eleanor, and when I called her, mom was like, "Who is this?" And I was like, "I'm her web leader," and she was all excited because they had been told about it. And then on the day that they came, the first day of school, we were in the big gym, and we all played games at first, and then we all found each other's groups, and we were taken to a classroom, and the teacher was in there just in case something happened, but didn't really get involved. And first we played like little games with balloons and pencils and straws and stuff, and got to know everybody's names. And we asked any questions if they had, and we answered them. And we gave them little tricks like cutting through the library works between classes and stuff like that. And how if you were late, you had chances, like you had 3 times to be late before you get in big trouble. And big trouble. Yeah, and then we gave them a tour of the school, and if they needed to know where a classroom was, we could show them on the tour. And then, like, later in the year, before the first dance, we got together during one of our seminar times, and they seemed to be fitting in really well, and they've got their locker combination down. That's one thing they were really scared about. And now they just seem like they've been there for like years, like as 9th graders. And we got together, well, a little after the dance, I can't remember when, and they were all like, "Oh, it was so much fun," and now they know people from other web groups. And I get sometimes where, "Can I switch web groups because all my friends are in there?" But it doesn't really work that way. So it's kind of been fun for them, I think. So thank you.
Chloe.
So a wonderful opportunity for our students to get to mentor the students that are coming in, and that's been a wonderful activity at Pioneer Trail. And also that program, for example, a similar program is a Frontier Trail, one they designed themselves, kind of modeled after Adlai Stevenson High School. We also have a mentoring programs going on at the high school, and Dr. Tom Berry from Olathe East is going to talk to us a little bit about mentoring at the high school level, as well as also going to talk a little bit about connecting with parents, another overarching aspect. Dr. Berry.
Thank you, Dr. Bankowski. I guess to start, I'd like to, since Tanya said that the students in 6th grade are a little bit afraid of what's going to happen if they're late to class. They seem to get over that once they get to high school. So I think we must do a good job helping them through that transition somehow. Very pleased to talk about 2 things that we do among the many things to help our 10th graders get acclimated to the high school experience. First of all, mentoring program is something that While all of our high schools have that in place now, certainly at Olathe, it's a very important part of our curriculum and what we provide for our 10th grade students. We had 130 upperclassmen this year who provided mentoring for 10th grade students throughout this entire school year. That involves helping them become acclimated to the school, as well as helping them feel like they are a part of the school. Quite often, 10th graders, it's a big place, it's a much bigger school than they've ever been in. We try to really help them to feel like they are part of Olathe East and feel comfortable with that, but also provide them skills to be successful at the high school level. We've also found out that by doing this, we've provided a great opportunity for our upperclassmen to become leaders and take responsibility for helping those 10th graders be successful at the high school. And at Olathe East, as at all the schools, those upperclassmen run the program. They put together the activities, they train to get ready for the activities, and then carry them out. We're very proud of them. We also instituted this year a program to help our parents become more acclimated. We call it Sophomore Parent Night. This was a combination of work between our Olathe East Site Council and the school, where we put together a parent night just for sophomores. We had over 500 parents come to Sophomore Parent Night this last August to learn more about the school, the activities our school provides, the supports our school provides, the chance to ask questions, and then we had a great deal of help from Heather Schoonover and her division in helping our parents to understand some of the things to be careful about, being careful with cyber security, cyber safety, so that our parents realize what our students have the opportunities through technology to be careful about. So again, we're very pleased to take on both of those things, and thank you for letting me be here tonight to say a little bit about them. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Berry. All of our schools are developing action plans, and they are action plans that involve both the school, sending school, if you will, as well as the schools together. Both the sending and receiving school are working together, whether they're the elementary school and the junior high, or the junior high and the high school. And then also the receiving school has some roles in that, and some of the things they do as they take the student on. And all of our schools are coming up with comprehensive transition programs, building upon the success that they've already had. We have some desired outcomes, everything from students viewing the new school positively in terms of both academics as well as the activities they'll be involved in a safe and secure learning environment. Certainly our parents, we want them to feel very confident about this transition. And we want our staff to understand both what it is developmentally that our students need, as well as a lot of vertical alignment. And of course, our administrators have played a wonderful role, as well as our counselors have been involved in some of that. We certainly know if we want to have student learning excel in this district, we have to continue to build upon all the strengths the students have, but also to help take care of some of their worries and concerns they have about transitioning, because everything does begin with transition, and that's why we've been so focused on that this year. It's so important for us. We have a lot of goals. We want students to feel real connections with each other, to feel connections with their school. We want students to understand that adults care about them and their success. We want to certainly increase all those important things like attendance and grades. And we also know that transition is not a single event. It is a foundation for success as we help our students as they prepare for another level of their academic careers. We certainly know that we are creating a bridge. We're creating a bridge between one school and another school and helping students to walk, and parents and staff to walk over that bridge. Thank you very much, and all these people are available for questions.
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Banikowski, and all of you for speaking tonight. Board members, are there any questions or comments? Mr. Parker?
I have one for Dr. Berry. Dr. Berry, last year, Mr. Gilmore and myself, and I think Ms. Ashley visited, maybe Mr. Gilmore and myself visited Adlai Stevenson. And what I came with from that visit was the transition program at Adlai Stevenson, because they bring 1,000 students from 14 different junior highs to that school, and they're out of all different districts. And they have one full-time staff person who is in charge of that transition process of doing the mentoring, the student mentoring. They use student mentors. I forget what they call them, something different than the web group, but they have a name how they bring them into that process. So what's the staff's role in this, and do you have a full-time staff member dedicated to the transitioning process, and how do you see that being in the future in regards to staff time and how it would be implemented at the staff level and created, and the synergy continued with the staff as far as the staff participation is concerned?
We started with 2 sponsors. One of those sponsors has left us, but we have 2 sponsors at Olathe East who now complete all the training, sometimes with some outside help from outside agencies. It depends on the week and what we are working on within the mentoring for that week. We started our first year with a consultant and actually hired a consultant to help us through that first year and get us on guard, so to speak. And that was a very good idea for us, but what we did find is we felt like we had a lot of good ideas, and we had staff that had the talent and had the knowledge available for the most part to do the training and put the program together. Because remember, again, it is a goal of ours that the kids will run the program. And so they have a good idea of the types of things our sophomores need to learn and know through our mentoring program, and the staff is there to guide and facilitate that. So I pay stipends to those individuals. They have full-time jobs within our building already to do this on top of their other job already. And they are very proud of that, and it's become a very important thing in our building.
So that's the way you see it continuing in the future then?
It is. I worry about the transition of staff. I always thinking about who's the next person going to take this on and continue to build with it, because what we found is we're much better at it now than we were 4 years ago when we started. We've learned a lot.
I'm not sure that we could ever get to the point that Adley's at. They have one person I think has been in that position for like 20 or 25 years, and but that's her whole responsibility and whole role in the school. And I'm not sure that we could get there from a financial or from a human capacity to get to that, but we certainly needs to be some staff directive involved in that. I'd like to hear in the future how our other 3 high schools are performing at this level, and we hear from Olathe East, but I would be interested to hear what the transition plan is at our other high schools as well.
And all 4 of our high schools have student mentoring programs. They're different levels, but we have the Falcon mentors and all those.
Would it be possible to learn more about those as well?
Certainly.
Yes.
Okay.
I had to fight them off from all the schools coming tonight.
Okay. But I think I would, for me, I don't know about the rest of the fellow board members, but I'd like to hear from those schools as well.
I would just add that this has been extremely helpful to hear about the programs that are going on at the different levels. So I appreciate you including elementary, junior high, as well as senior high.
Dr. Beninkowski, I heard in the presentation that some of the data that you're using is like attendance. What other information are you collecting to know that these transitions, as you work through programs, you like to know that this is where we started, these are the improvements that were made, so that any changes that need to be made. So what I hear surveys, I hear what else, or are there other pieces of information?
There are other aspects of the program, and certainly transition weaves itself. It's hard to separate just transition out to then talking about helping to intervene with students that are having challenges. At the high school, junior high and high school level, we talked about the research on 9th graders. There's a lot of research on 9th grade being a critical, important year. Now remember, most of that research is on 9-12 schools, but it's still, we felt it had an impact for us. So we're not only looking at 9th graders, we're looking at 10th graders. We have created a new data system, and thanks to Rita Lyon has been very aggressive in helping us with that, where we can really concentrate on attendance, for example. It's called the data dashboard. At their fingertips, we've worked with counselors and principals as well at both levels to understand the program, be able to look at data. I know Kara Lane, for example, at Santa Fe had her top 30 list, because if students are having attendance issues in the first 30 days, that's a big, huge warning flag, so we're looking at data all the time. So that would just be one example. Then additionally, we started our data access program that provides a longitudinal or any kind of picture you really want to look at for data from Kansas Assessment, so we can monitor students. I think that's another area that we continue to work on, because looking at data and making sure you're looking at what are the interventions. We can look at data and feel bad about data, but we have to have those interventions in place. So that's been a focus area as well.
Thank you.
A lot of training and a lot of opportunities to share with each other. I would also add, these folks are learning a lot from each other. What one thinks of, and then the other takes that idea and modifies it to their own building needs, and that's been very exciting to see.
Mr. Bowen?
Because we've recognized the importance of this, and do appreciate all the work that everybody's done here, but what is the long-term focus to be sure that this program continues beyond this year, the importance that we're putting on this transition area? What is the long-term plans?
I think that one of the things is that we already discovered we had many things happening in transition activities that followed with all the overarching principles. So it's like, okay, great, we're doing lots of great things. What we didn't have is we didn't have it specified so that if, I always try not to use that if you die and you weren't here tomorrow, but I always try, if you won the lottery and you became a philanthropist and you weren't here tomorrow, who would know we were that comprehensive program, and who will remember that you did surveys of students? Who will remember that you had this opportunity where staff got to do some vertical alignment? And that's why we're creating the notebook, so that every school will have a transition program notebook that somebody can pull off the shelf. It's owned by lots of people. For example, the counselors own a big part of it. When it comes to pre-enrollment, which is part of transition activities, that needs to be in one place. So I think that's what will help sustain it, is just making it more visible and reminding people we have these components. Some are new. Some are the old components we've already done that were very successful. We just need to place them in a spot. So that's been very helpful for us. We're not there yet, but our goal is by the end of this year is we will all have 100% of our schools a comprehensive seamless transition program. It will be different because we want to meet the different needs of the different schools and have a little different flavor. Good question. Thank you, Mr. Fine.
And can we expect to have these reports every year?
On
If
this
there's
topic
time.
alone, or on the
Successes?
199 more stories we could tell about?
I mean.
Yeah, I know, this is good, this is positive. Yes, we will try to do more.
Thank you.
And well, thank you all very much. There's some wonderful things that are happening in our schools. We appreciate all your efforts, and thanks for coming tonight and telling us about it. We'll move on to agenda item 2.02, dealing with our bond finance information for the first issuance. I believe Mr. Diener is going to introduce this topic for us. Our objective tonight, members of the board, is to give our staff direction on how we see this first issuance taking shape, and
good evening.
We'll go from there. Thank you.
It wasn't that long ago, October 16th, when our community was celebrating the successful election of the bond election for the $138 million of worth of projects moving forward for our future. And it's every single day since that time, every single division in our organization has been actively working towards that implementation. No one probably harder, though, than in the service center, where under the leadership of Jim Houghton, who's John, and Greg Thomason, they have been working on the planning and development of the construction of the projects that are first up on the list. And part of their expectation is that there's going to be some funding that's going to be available when those bills first start coming due, and so that's been our focus in business and finance. We have been working with our financial advisors, Springstead, most notably Marty Noe and Tom Calico, who's here with me this evening, and also our bond counsel, Gilmer and Bell. And a lot of the information that has been developed has been provided to the board over the past year. In many cases, it's been many different options, many different scenarios of the possibility that we'll be looking at some point in time, and that some point in time is now. As of the last couple months, the board has appointed a finance committee, of which is joined by President Gilmore and Mr. Churchman, along with 3 district staff members of Dr. Marlon Berry, John Hutchison, and myself. And we have been working, and one of the things that not only other kind of financial concepts, but also working on this bond finance package, all the information. And we've been looking at the details and working very closely with Springstead as far as trying to iron out everything that we need to present to the board at this point in time. So this evening, what we'd like to do is go over some of the key elements that are important, that are included in your bond package. For this evening, we want to look at the timeline. We want to look at some of the financial plan concepts, the options for the length of term, the impact of the whole $138 million as it's going to impact as we play it all out over the next 3 or 4 years. And at some point in time, the board will not be asked to have any action this evening, but we will ask for your guidance in how we can create that resolution document that will be presented to the board on January 10th for action, for approval, to move forward to the actual sale of the first bond. And so with that as an overview, I would like to introduce again Tom Calico from Springstead, and he's going to go through some of the details of the information for this evening. Tom? Thanks, Gary.
Okay, great.
Well, it's good to be back with you again this evening. Marty and I were reminiscing a little bit earlier today. We've spent quite a bit of time with you in the planning phase for this bond issuance, very successfully. We're glad to see, of course. And we are now transitioning from the planning phase into what we generally refer to as the structuring phase, of trying to figure out the fine details of the structure of this first bond issuance associated with the referendum. Looking towards the next phase, which is the marketing phase, which is actually putting that bond issuance out on the street for the market to bid upon. So what we'll be talking a lot about today is going, like I say, making that transition, seems to be the word of the evening, from the planning phase through structuring into marketing. What Gary's put on the screen is an overview of the schedule of events for this first bond issuance. And just to go briefly through that, here we are this evening talking about the plan, the initial plan of finance. On January 10th, then you'll have the opportunity to consider a resolution that I understand Gilmore and Bell has already prepared for you, a draft of, that would actually authorize the sale of the bonds. On the 16th, we'll have then the official publication for the bond sale, letting the market know that we're preparing for this bond issuance. On the 28th, week of the 28th, we'll do rating reviews with both Moody's and Standard & Poor's. I don't know, when you say rating reviews, a lot of people have this picture of making the big trip out to New York, and those days are, well, that used to happen. Those days are long gone. Basically, it's a bunch of people sitting in a room at a teleconference, not nearly as exciting as it once was. With the sale then occurring on February 7th at 11 o'clock a.m., I do want to note in a couple of documents I've noted it says 10, but it will be at 11 o'clock. On February 7th, then, that evening, we'll have the approval of the sale, and then we expect to close on the bond issue somewhere around February 28th or March 4th. We have prepared for you, I think you all received in your packets, what we're calling the preliminary plan of finance. We also sometimes refer to these as our recommendations. This is a very important document. Springstead provides this with every bond issuance that we work on. And the goal here is to provide the basic structure of the bond issue for you as elected officials so that you understand very clearly what it is that you're about to enter into. Also, we do that because it's very helpful for, as you would imagine, there are many participants in a bond issuance process. There's all of your staff, yourselves, there's bond counsel, financial advisors, many different parties from the private market looking into this. So it's very important to have a very clear understanding about all the facts surrounding a bond issuance right at the beginning. And so this set of recommendations or initial plan of finance that we provided you essentially becomes kind of the Bible that we all refer back to as we go through all the way through the process. And it becomes the foundation then for the preparation of the various bond documents that you'll be seeing, including the official statement. That initial plan of finance has settled in on quite a few of the details of the bond issuance, but there are a couple of details that I understand you need to consider this evening. And one of them is the term of this bond issue. And we have provided in our preliminary plan of finance 3 different alternatives for you to consider. One of them is a 15-year term, another is a 20-year term, and then a 25-year term. And on the slide that you have in front of you, I think it does a good job of demonstrating essentially the main issue surrounding these different terms. And that is there's a trade-off between cost and flexibility. What you'll see is with the shorter issuance, obviously you have a less interest cost, but you also tend to get a higher mill levy. And you can see that by looking at the last 2 columns. You'll see in the 2008, 2009, they're roughly the same, and that's because in that year we're going to be paying interest only. So you end up with roughly the same impact. But when you look further down, you go to 2009-10, you start to see the difference, and you'll see that the shorter the term, the slightly higher levy, and that's the pattern that you would see then throughout the life of the bond issue. So there's a bit of a trade-off, and really this becomes, to some degree, a question of how much risk do you feel like you can bear. Going with the longer term gives you a little bit more room as you have future bond issues, and we know we have 2 more bond issues associated with this, and then you have other needs coming up in the future. So going with that longer term gives you a little bit more flexibility, but does cost you more in interest. Springstead did recommend a 20-year term. I would tell you that we are entirely comfortable with a 15-year term if that's the way the board elects to go. This slide comes from, and think back, I know it's a long time ago, pre-referendum. We did, in the planning phase, we prepared for you a model that very accurately can predict, very accurately in the shorter term and less accurately probably as you get out into 20 years from now, but it's a highly sophisticated model for projecting your bond and interest levy. And this slide that you see in front of you is from that model, and you may recall that we used a 20-year term assumption for all 3 of the bond issues. And just to refresh your memory, we had assumed a $50 million bond issue in late 2007, $50 million in early 2009, and $38 million in early 2010. We'd also assumed 6% growth in assessed valuation, that the state aid reimbursement would be at the rate of 7% for the life of the bonds. The assumed interest rates at that time for 2007 and 2009 were 4.5% and 5% for 2010. We also assumed that interest earnings would be used for debt service and that there wouldn't be any additional restructuring of existing debt, i.e. refundings, during this period of time. And you'll see that the maximum levy is 20.7 mils in 2008-2009. This is that period where we're paying off the capital anticipation bonds. And so we have a peak there, and you'll see that we kind of run through this peak for the next 5 years, and then it very quickly we get past that and we start to see a rapid decrease in debt service and the impact on the mill levy. Going back to this question again, a trade-off, 15 versus 20-year term. If you can imagine for a moment, this shows a 20-year scenario. If we were to use a 15-year scenario for either just one issue or all 3 issues, what you would see is that the shape of this line, of this curve, essentially that's formed by these bars, would be slightly higher starting in 2009-10 fiscal year. If we used a 25-year term for one or all of the upcoming bond issues, you would see that that curve would be slightly lower. So you can kind of get a mental picture of, again, this trade-off of flexibility versus cost. One of the things that we wanted you to know about, as we have done in past bond issues, Springstead has been asked by the staff to handle the investment of the bond proceeds. As I mentioned earlier, that investment income is planned to be used for debt service. We'll be doing that through our sister organization, Springstead Investment Advisors. The way that works is we, of course, act strictly as your consultant on it. We do not actually bid on the investment ourselves. We go, and just as we do with the bonds, we put the option to bid on that investment out to the market. And the bidders are usually highly rated banks, insurance companies, government security dealers, those types of companies. The bid will be taken either on or very soon after the bond sale itself.
Excuse me, Mr. Calico, one question on that.
Sure.
Those institutions, is there state statutes that we have to abide by in regards to ensuring the solvency of that organization where we choose to put these proceeds?
There are indeed state statutes, and we have in the past used what's called a repurchase agreement which is a collateralized investment. But yeah, your bond counsel, Gilmore and Bell, is well aware of what we're doing here, and we work very closely with them to make sure that we meet all state statutes. So as I mentioned at the outset, there are a couple of items that I know staff is looking for guidance on. One of them is the amount of this first bond sale. We have in the planning phase been assuming a $50 million sale. I understand from the staff that $50 million does appear to be about the right number in terms of allowing sufficient funds for the first phase of projects. And then the other issue is the length of the bond term. As I mentioned, we are recommending a 20-year, but are certainly comfortable if you would choose to go 15. Do not recommend the 25. Their next action will be on February 7th. That's when you will consider the resolution authorizing the sale. And as I said, I believe you have received a draft of that resolution. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I'll just say to Mr. Diener and Mr. Calico, this is a great plan here. I appreciate all the work that you've done. I think as we've looked through the details here, the recommendations that you've made from my perspective are right. Certainly, we've looked hard just for the rest of the board's edification at the 15-year versus 20-year amortization. I think your guidance is good on that for the first issuance to be more conservative there. And potentially, as we go down the road to the next issuance, all things being equal, there's an opportunity there to maybe be a bit more aggressive on repayment terms. So, you know, my thoughts to the board are we take a look at that then. But I think the plan in place is a good one.
Thank you.
Mr. Parker?
I'm in agreement. The 20 years gives us more flexibility with the next two issues, and we can always refund them if we get out 4 or 5 years and have an opportunity. But I don't believe that we could go back from a 15-year issuance and move it to a 20-year issuance. So we can go one way but not the other one. So with a 20-year issuance, it would give us a term, would give us a lot more flexibility going forward.
Has our history been that we take that in consideration and we have, if we have issuances of 50, 50, and 38, have we historically moved ahead of that schedule in those three in payoff?
I believe you're speaking to the refunding issue?
Yes.
I think the safe way of answering that is that we've always reevaluated every time we bring to the board another issuance and tried to provide all the different options that were available. And sometimes because of the economic situation, because of interest rates that were prevailing, that's been beneficial to move in that direction. Other times it hasn't been, so it hasn't been a recommendation. But I think the key point is that we reevaluate that every time we come to a new issuance.
Yeah, and I think the reevaluation is important, at least it is to me, and I think it is to my colleagues, that we continue to evaluate, and I know you do that. Then we can face the issue of, well, do we want to shorten that term at that point or not? That is an option we'll keep on our side if we chose to do that, but even just keeping the same schedule, that's how you evaluate the refunding initially, is we can keep the same schedule but save money by a refunding, and then we can ask the question, do we want to shorten it even further and save even more? Exactly. But that all has mill levy implications, as we know.
That's correct.
Yeah, and I know that they look to balance off each other. When you look at the amount of money or amount in interest versus 15 versus 20, that was a consideration, obviously, for those of you that studied it in depth and still saw advantage to the flexibility, I'm assuming, and also advantage to looking at a repayment earlier. Is that what?
Yeah, and on a personal basis, I mean, I'm always one that would gear towards the shorter term because on a personally, if it was me borrowing the money, there's other things I can do to try to deal with that. But we only have one choice, and that's a mill levy. That's the only tool by which we have to manage the issue. So in me, that's why I lean towards the 20 years, and then we can continue to evaluate as we go if there's opportunities.
Okay.
And I think it's good for us to remember that the reason that we have that 5-year hump here is because of a refunding issue that we have done, we completed several times, I believe, in the last 3 or 4 years at the recommendation of our bond counsel to shorten it up and also to save money long-term in interest payments. So it makes us a little tight right now, but at the time we made that decision, it was the right decision, and it still is. But we just, I think we would want to leave ourselves that kind of flexibility going forward in the future as well.
So we can assume we'll continue with that history then. Okay.
Anyone else? Mr. Poland?
Just a general question, since we basically said that the $50 million is sufficient for the first round. We obviously have prioritized the projects. Is that a list that we will have shortly presented to us?
Dr. All, wasn't that list provided last in November?
Was it?
Yes, it was on the, you were provided that list last month.
I was probably asleep during that part of it, sorry.
Okay. We didn't discuss it. We had no discussion, but it's been provided to you. So
Okay.
be glad to follow up on that with anybody going forward. If we set the amount, there's still the opportunity for a little flexibility on the project side. So if you want to review that and visit with me about it, we can continue to discuss that. But we need direction on the amount, which I would support the $50 million, and I think that gives us the flexibility to start. And if in terms of my working with Mr. Thomason on the sequence of those projects, what we try to do is get projects started in design so that when we have the second issuance, we're ready to go. And I think that list has a lot of flexibility in it. But again, we can visit a little bit more about that, and I would welcome that from the board.
Well, thank you, gentlemen and board members. Just to remind everyone that we're moving towards that $50 million resolution for our January meeting, and I'm not hearing any resistance to that. So that's how everything will fall into place so we can move forward, adopt the resolution in January, and then have the sale in February. So thank you, gentlemen, for all your work. Mr. Klico, you've done a wonderful job for us. And Mr. Churchman, thank you for your analysis as we've studied this, and we appreciate that tonight. Thank you. We were originally scheduled on 2.03 to have a bullying strategic plan presentation. We're going to defer that to just before the action item that's later in the agenda for the sake of trying to stay on time with our agenda. So if you'll bear with me on that. I believe we're at the point here where we can take our break for 15 minutes, and we'll stand adjourned until our break ends at 6:45.
Sometimes it's hard to go to the cooking class.
Good for you. I'm glad you. How was it?
It's very fun. We did sauces.
I'd like to call our meeting back to order, please. That time in our agenda where we do recognitions and awards. And I'll turn the dais over to Laura Lee.
Thank you. Welcome to our very special guests and their families and friends. And as I call your name or the recognition, your portion of the recognitions, please come forward down the center aisle. I'm going to ask Mr. Jim Smith, our Director of Community Development, to assist with the first recognitions, which is for our Alumni Wall of Honor. For the first portion of this, I'm going to direct your attention to the screen where we have the recognitions on our website. Last month, the Olathe District Schools Alumni Association inducted its inaugural class of distinguished graduates to the Wall of Honor, which recognizes lifetime achievements of outstanding alums. Criteria for the Wall of Honor were developed by Doug Perrin and the Recognition Committee. Candidates must be graduates of an Olathe high school, must have graduated at least 20 years ago, and must have attained a high level of achievement in personal or professional life, community or humanitarian service, or in a lifelong commitment to educational excellence. This evening, we're pleased to introduce the first 9 inductees into the Alumni Wall of Honor. 6 of the honorees are deceased, so I'm going to direct your attention to the screen as I tell you about them. Stanley T. Adams, who graduated from Olathe High School in 1942. He received the Congressional Medal of Honor for acts of bravery and heroism in the Korean War. Joyce Brown graduated from Olathe High School in 1914. She taught school for 30 years, most of that time as a Latin and Spanish teacher at Olathe High School. She served as principal of Olathe High School from 1936 to 1947 and was active in civic and community affairs. Herbert Hadley graduated from Olathe High School in 1887. He served as Missouri Attorney General, was the state's governor from 1909 to 1913, And in 1923, he left his position as law professor at the University of Colorado to become the chancellor of Washington University in St. Louis. Ella Mahaffey graduated from Olathe High School in 1885. She taught 3rd and 7th grades at Central School in Olathe from 1889 to 1907 and served as teacher and administrator in Kansas City, Kansas for 30 years. In 1913, she was appointed to the Kansas Board of Education. J.C. Nichols graduated from Olathe High School in 1897. As a prominent developer in Kansas City, his projects included the first suburban shopping center in the nation, the Country Club Plaza. He also served in the National Park and Planning Commission under 3 presidents. Buddy Rogers graduated from Olathe High School in 1922. He went to Hollywood and starred in Wings, which won the first Academy Award in 1927. He also performed with his own jazz band in motion pictures and on radio and was rumored to be able to play every instrument in the band. 2 of the last 3 recipients are here this evening, and at this time I will ask them to come forward with Doug Perrin. Harley Haskin and Nan Bowl. Former Governor John Anderson Jr. was not able to be with us tonight. He graduated from Olathe High School in 1935, served as Kansas Attorney General from 1956 to 1960, and was governor from 1961 to 1965. But with us tonight, we have Nanette Heyer Bull, who graduated from Olathe High School in 1947. She was one of the first Red Cross water safety instructors in Johnson County, and she has supervised swimming classes since 1959. She and her husband, Ford, organized the first Olathe swim team, the Amateur Athletic Union, now U.S. Swimming. In 1988, she began to swim competitively again and has won a number of medals. Harley Haskin graduated from Olathe High School in 1928 and was on the student committee that helped select the eagle as the school's mascot. He practiced law in Olathe from 1936 to 1981. Served as president of the Johnson County Bar Association and county probate and juvenile judge from 1947 to 1953. During his years in Olathe, he served as legal counsel for the Olathe School Board and Olathe Hospital, which he helped found. He was a trustee for Baker University for 20 years and was president of the Olathe Rotary Club and the Olathe Chamber of Commerce. Let's give a hand to our honorees who are here tonight. We invite you to visit the electronic wall of honor, which we've been showing you, and eventually a physical wall with plaques will be established here at the Education Center. Doug Perrin and his committee are hopeful that when people see the wall, they will be reminded not only of the talented individuals who are on the wall, but also of all the other special individuals who touched their lives while they were in school in Olathe. And do you have family members here tonight? Family members here tonight? Would you, oh. And Harley?
Wife, Jerry, son Mike.
Judy? Now we're going to take a picture.
I didn't know that.
Scott, wait a second. Pardon me? Yes, I. Our next recognition is going to be for Amy Harper from Arbor Creek Elementary School. And will she come forward with Mrs. Courtney Exby, who is representing the principal of Arbor Creek? Mrs. Exby was Amy's second grade teacher. Since 1993, Mimi's Cafe has sponsored a Thanksgiving-themed essay contest for students in the greater Kansas City metropolitan area called The Right Stuff. This year, Amy Harper, who's a fourth grade student at Arbor Creek, was honored as the top fourth grade finalist in the city during an awards presentation and luncheon in November. Amy wrote about her gratitude that her grandparents adopted her and her siblings. As a finalist, Amy received a $1,000 savings bond, and finalists also read their essays on local radio stations and are interviewed on television. I believe that Amy's grandparents, Fred and Pam Moore, are here too, so let's give Amy and her grandparents a big hand. And do you have other family members? Amy, do you have any other family members here? Your mom? Uh-huh. And your sister and brother, would they please? Is that your brother standing taking pictures? And where's sister? I see some men in uniform back there, and I think I want them to come forward now. Tim Hepner, Tad Crape, Tom Thorup, and Dan Kroll, with Joanne Hyatt, our district math coordinator. Pardon me? And Carol Beaver, and is Andy here? Okay. We've had something really exciting happening in our Title I elementary schools called Kids and Cars. Two of our math and science instructional resource teachers, Carol Beaver and Andy Heiling, recruited community members to help with this half-day activity at each school, and I think they recruited the most exciting community members they could find. Tim Hepner, who's a Kansas Highway Patrolman, brings his scales to weigh some really big vehicles. Tom Thorup and Dan Kroll, who are Olathe firefighters, bring a fire truck, and Tad Crape, who's a state trooper, participates as they teach the children how to estimate and measure large items, which is a math skill tested on the Kansas assessments. The students weigh a motorcycle, a Volkswagen Bug, a patrol car, and a fire truck. And then I think they also weigh each other. Is that right?
We weigh the kids.
I thought you were weighing each other. Throughout the month of October, these gentlemen gave of their time and talent to help bring math to life for children at all 10 of our Title I elementary schools. Let's give them a big hand of appreciation.
Thank you very much for coming. Appreciate it. Thank you. It sounds like a fun project. I'm not going to come with these scales, though. No teachers agreed to do it either, so that's why these kids.
She's already negotiating for next year. Now our Chisholm Trail 7th grade health students. Please come forward. Taylor Brewer, Madison Bryant, Aaron Collins, Hannah Dolezal, Timory Estes, Miranda Fozzie, Millie Foose, Cassidy Goodman, Morgan Harmelink, Hope Mansker, Kelly Monson, Jacob Pedden, Haley Von Felt, Jennifer Woolzer, and their counselor, Mrs. Bonnie Swade, and his principal, Mr. Bill Weber, here. And Becky Verbus, representing Chisholm Trail. Thank you. One of the assignments for students in the 7th grade health classes was to design a poster with a positive message regarding accepting and respecting others. Counselors Bonnie Swade and Mary Smith went to the health classes and had discussions with the students about teens building relationships. During National Suicide Awareness Week, the students created their posters about respect, acceptance, and building relationships. A selection of posters were sent to the state of Kansas, where they will be used in the state's ongoing campaign to reduce the stigma and discrimination that surrounds mental health issues. Mr. Neil Isles, the state project coordinator, came to Chisholm Trail to present certificates to the students, and tonight we'd like to congratulate the students on the state recognition of their work and give them a big hand for making a difference. Okay, are there any family members here? Do any of you have family members here? Would the family members please stand and be recognized, or wave your hand if you're already standing? Now we're going to recognize the Olathe East girls gymnastic team. Would you please come forward with head coach Lydia Messenger and Dr. Tom Berry, principal. This is a team that has been competing together for a while. The team members are senior Taylor Berggren, juniors Annie Pauls and Beth Copeland, and sophomore Ellie Steck. The head coach is Lydia Messenger, and the managers are Casey Pauls and Brett Palmer. Together, the team pulled off a state championship at the Kansas Gymnastics meet in November. In addition, Taylor was first on the vault and on the balance beam, so she earned 2 individual gold medals. Coach Messenger said it's all about teamwork and how the girls really pull together to support each other. So congratulations to the 2007 Kansas Gymnastics State Championship team. Okay, and do you have any family members here? I do. Family members, please stand and be recognized. Wave and be recognized. Did you want to make a comment, Lydia?
Well, first of all, I would like to congratulate the girls. They are definitely the best gymnast in the state, and it was an honor to be awarded that title on November 3rd. I also would like to thank the board members for recognizing us tonight and recognizing the girls and supporting our program, you know, throughout the many years. And I would also like to thank our administrators at the high school that support the sport of gymnastics. Thank you.
Our final recognition is of the United Way Executive Committee. Jim Ader, Dottie Bush, Nancy Cheatham, Carolyn Pickering, Connie V. Brock, Becky Verbus, and Chairman Jim Smith. Come on, Chairman. This was another record year for United Way in the Olathe School District. A record number of employees participated in the two-week campaign, and they set a new record of donations, $98,663, with 1,848 employees donating. The campaign was chaired by Mr. Jim Smith with his devoted group of motivators, and they motivated people to try all kinds of ways to inspire giving, including silent auctions, passes to wear jeans day, a twin day event here at the Ed Center, and even a sumo wrestling contest between assistant principals at Santa Fe Trail. We should have that on Channel 18. The three buildings with the largest overall donations were the Ed Center with 7,500, Olathe North with almost 5,300, and the Instructional Resource Center at 3,900. But we would like to congratulate all the employees who donated and to the United Way campaign team. Thank you.
Well, congratulations to everyone, and thank you, Laura Lee, for helping us with those recognitions and awards. The time in our meeting where we have public comments. At each regular meeting, the board reserves limited time for individuals wishing to address the board. We request that individual speakers limit their comments to 5 minutes. The clerk will monitor the time and notify the speaker when the 5-minute time limit has expired. We ask that you please direct your comments to the entire board, and if a response is appropriate, the president will respond or refer to another individual. In an effort to respect privacy, we ask that speakers refrain from discussing personal complaints involving individual staff members or students. Those speaking are advised that public comments are videotape recorded for broadcast on the district's educational access channel and audio tape recorded as a matter of public record. Individuals addressing the board should come to the podium at the front of the room directly here to my right and state your name and address before you speak. Our first speaker is Dawn Smith. Welcome, Ms. Smith.
My name's Dawn Smith, and I live at 716 North Purdom. I grew up here in Olathe, and my son and daughter currently attend the same schools which I attended. My daughter is currently attending Santa Fe Trail, and my son is a kindergartner at Northview Elementary. Our family does not meet the income guidelines for reduced fee lunches. Because I feel strongly about this Title I full-day kindergarten issue, I felt a civic responsibility to make some comments, even though any decision that is made will not directly affect my family. The subject was brought to my attention when I read an article in the Olathe News which quoted Mr. Martin. I called and spoke to Mr. Martin in October about the issue and asked who proposed that we no longer pay for full-day kindergarten for the children of families in the Title I school areas that do not meet the reduced lunch fee program. He told me that no one person had proposed it, that it was just being discussed. At the last school board meeting, one of the council members asked Mr. Martin what had brought the issue up for discussion. Mr. Martin's response seemed to be that it was because of money and how much the school district would be able to save. I don't think we should be looking at enhancing our reserves in that manner. Children of kindergarten age are like sponges. Full-day kindergarten greatly benefits all children from all socioeconomic groups. Another reason Mr. Martin brought up is that it is not fair to the children in the other school areas that are not offered free full-day kindergarten. It was mentioned that a council member lived in one of the Title I areas and their children were able to attend the free full-day kindergarten. To qualify to be a Title I school, the incomes of the families within that area must meet certain guidelines. Not all families in any area would meet those guidelines, and I don't think that is what our city would want. I hope not. I can't imagine that families who may think it's unfair that Bobby across the street gets full free-day kindergarten would want it to be taken away from him. I think they want it added for their child also. Could we suggest ways to them that we could work toward making full-day kindergarten happen for all children in Olathe? I was disheartened to hear in the last council meeting that it was being asked of Mr. Martin to look into a sliding scale for full-day kindergarten fees. I do not think that the incomes of Olathe residents should be taken into account for education fees in our public school system. I also feel like we're being done for both parents working hard to provide for our family. Is full-day K to become just a place where children from families that are not primarily English-speaking can learn the language? In another Olathe News article, it seemed the early education program is working on that matter already, as the majority of the children are not from primary English-speaking families. Are we setting back the children that already speak English? If a sliding scale for kindergarten fees was implemented, would it be for all grade schools in Olathe? Because if it would not be for all grade schools and only Title I, then those thinking it unfair would still think it unfair. I do understand reduced fees for nutritional reasons, as in lunches or where extracurricular activities may be concerned, but I think we should not base any child's education in the public school system on a sliding fee schedule. We should all be working towards full-day kindergarten for all of the children in Olathe because of the great benefits. We should not be considering charging families for full-day kindergarten in the Title I areas that do not meet the income guidelines for reduced lunches. In my opinion, that would translate into cutting kids from all-day kindergarten. Again, we shouldn't be considering enhancing our monetary reserves in this manner. I hope that all the council members would place district-wide full-day kindergarten at the top of their list of priorities to be taken to the state legislators, because it is such a great advantage for our little ones. I would hope, if it is not at the top of your list, that it would at least be as high as additional interpreters. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Next speaker is Catherine Schlem.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Catherine Schlem. My address is 814 North Stevenson Street in Olathe. I am in the Northview School District. I'm coming to you to discuss the 6-9 reconfiguration program. I come from a 6-9 type of school district. Yates Center, Kansas is in southeast Kansas. We have a elementary/middle school that goes from K through 5 in one pod and 6 through 8 in another pod. We have a separate building across town that goes 9 through 12. I come from that system. When I come here as somebody coming from that system and a parent living in this system today. There are massive advantages to moving a 6th grade student to a junior high location. Some of those advantages I would list in my information packet that I provided to the secretary. But one of the main advantages is that a 6th grader has more in common with a 7th and 8th grader than they do with a kindergartner, a 1st grader. They have more common experience. They have more common interest. They have more common feel for life around them. Also, a 6th grader would have more advantages at the junior high level. Better laboratories, better science facilities, better information technology facilities. They would also have better opportunities to socially interact with, back in my day it was school dances. I don't know what you guys exactly call them now, but they are school dances in my opinion still. Those were types of social interactions that we had available to us as 6th, 7th, and 8th graders that prepared us to go on to the high school level. Similar advantages are evident at the high school level. 9th graders go to high school. They get that high school on their transcript. Colleges look at 9 through 12. Colleges don't look at 10 through 12 when they are ascertaining admittance and whether you qualify for some scholarships or certain other incentives to go to college. To have a high school name on your transcript instead of a junior high, Santa Fe Trail, Chisholm Trail, whatever, would be more advantageous to your opportunities in college than it would be if the status quo were maintained. Certainly there are challenges. There are transition issues which were addressed tonight. One of the transition methods that we used going from 8th grade to 9th grade, which I brought up to one of the transition crew individuals tonight, was a sort of a sneak a peek like they do for kindergarten here, but they do it for 9th graders where I'm from. You go one evening with your parents or without, it didn't matter. You sit in your first classroom. They ring the bell every 5 minutes. So you go a path from your first class to your second class to your third class to get a feel for the building. And then you come back to what we had was homeroom. You guys don't have homeroom up here because you get out at 3. We got out at 3:40 because we had an extra 40-minute homeroom period. But we had that opportunity to cycle between classes, to get the feel for where our lockers were in relationship to our classes, to get how we were going to go from room to room. There are other social issues that we have to deal with at those levels as well. Transitioning from 5th to 6th grade, transitioning from 8th to 9th grade. True, there will be bullying, there will be harassment, but there's harassment and bullying everywhere. The way that you deal with that is a comprehensive policy that prevents harassment, that prevents bullying, or that addresses it if it occurs. You don't deal with it by holding children back from a new experience that would be very valuable for them to experience during their educational career. Another small issue that I was wanting to deal with tonight was the all-day kindergarten issue. Ms. Smith made a great presentation on that, so I won't belabor the point. But I did take a figure amount of $39,000 of an annual salary, which does not qualify anybody for free and reduced lunches because it is currently $38,203 for the 2007-2008 school year based on the national guidelines. And I took that down with basic daily living expenses. And I gave you information that allows for you to see their disposable income for the year and a monthly disposable income. And I also gave you a copy of the letter that I wrote to Senator Karen Brownlee on this same issue.
Great, thank you, Ms. Schlemm. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dr. Joe Lamar.
Joe Lamar, 12481 South Hallett. In accordance with our school's vision, students prepared for their future, our guiding principle, respect for all, and our student goal, students contribute as responsible and productive citizens, I come tonight to give support to Connie Leone's request for all students to have a signed consent form before reading Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. It's my understanding that this permission slip procedure is already a wise practice of the school district for the viewing of the movie Of Mice and Men. There are 6 language arts that are important for all children to develop: reading, writing, speaking, viewing, listening, and visually representing. I believe that there should be equal treatment in guarding the minds of our students, whether we are expecting the reading of the book or the viewing of the movie. Please consider informing parents as well as requesting parental permission for our young people to read this book that deviates very little from the PG-13 movie. After the last board meeting, the Olathe News printed an editorial entitled Book Bans Attack Freedom. This editorial misrepresented Mike Poland's comments, and I was pleased that the next paper included Mike's clarification in his guest editorial. I would like to commend Mike for standing up for our children's character development and for our parents' rights to decide the content put before his or her child's eyes. The Olathe News also erroneously reported information about the use of the Bible in our schools. The editorial stated, take the Bible for instance. Poland referred to a book that is banned from public schools unless the student takes it upon himself or herself to bring it to school. It's not in curriculum, and most likely not in most school libraries. In truth, only devotional instruction of the Bible has been banned from public schools, and our Kansas State Social Studies standards include academic lessons of faith and religion in our K-12 benchmarks. Furthermore, Mary Ellen Grant, our library media coordinator, assured me that there is a copy of the Bible in 10 of our secondary attendance centers, several Bible story anthologies, and individual Bible stories in elementary and secondary libraries across the district, and that through interlibrary loan, all of these are available to any teachers across the district. Librarian Jeff Blair of Olathe South said that their library has a King James Bible, a Revised Standard Bible, a New Testament Jerusalem edition, a couple of concordances, and a Bible handbook. There's also a Torah, a Quran, and a copy of the Buddhist scriptures. So while you as a Board of Education decided not to ban the Steinbeck novel, I think it's important to note that neither have you banned the Bible or other books of faith, and for that I'm very grateful. The last thing I would like to suggest to you tonight is to consider joining the President of the United States in promoting Religious Freedom Day in our schools on Tuesday, January 16th. Religious Freedom Day is not a Celebrate Our Diversity Day, so principals and teachers can avoid the potential problem of any particular religious group feeling left out by keeping their focus on the issue of civil liberty instead of just religious diversity. One of the best ways to commemorate Religious Freedom Day is to tell students about their religious freedom in their classrooms and schools. Since 1995, the United States Department of Education has issued guidelines clarifying students' religious liberties at school. Religious Freedom Day is a perfect time for schools to promote greater clarity regarding students' religious freedom by distributing those guidelines to teachers, students, and parents. For more information regarding this anniversary of the 1786 Virginia Statute on Religious Freedom, I recommend you visit www.religiousfreedomday.com, and I've provided several resources for you to consider when planning activities for our district to promote Religious Freedom Day. I appreciate the time to speak tonight. As a professor of teacher education, I'm grateful for the effective mentoring teachers that you provide for our teacher candidates at MNU. Thanks for Quality School District.
Thank you, Dr. Lamar. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board? Oh, Ms. Leone, yes, please come forward. I didn't see you there. We can take care of the card afterwards.
Okay.
Welcome.
I'm Connie Leone, address 1361 East Sleepy Hollow Drive, Olathe, Kansas. As you may recall, I was here last month and asked you to remove the Book of Mice and Men from the school curriculum, and you voted and decided the book should still remain in the system. But prior to me coming before the board, I had to appeal to Dr. All, and she also felt the book should remain in the school system. However, she did make some recommendations regarding all books in the Olathe school system. In a nutshell, in her September 14th letter that she sent to me, she stated, all parents of 9th grade students will be notified by letter of all core reading titles to be taught in the 9th grade. This is to be done prior to their child reading any of the books. This is so that the parent can opt the child out of reading the book if they object to the content. So I felt it was fine you left the book in the system as long as parents would become knowledgeable of what their children were reading in school. The following Monday after the last board meeting, I contacted the principal of Indian Trail, Tracy Marion, to make sure a letter was being drafted to send to the parents of ninth graders reading of Mice and Men. I wanted to make sure that the letter got to the parents prior to the child reading it. Mrs. Marion, principal at IT, said she knew nothing about any letter and referred me to Kay Haas. Ms. Haas said she was in the process of drafting the letters, and I asked for a copy of the letter upon completion. She said that Dr. Banikowski had to approve, and if she did, I could have a copy of the draft going out. I reminded Mrs. Marion and Kay Haas that Dr. All said the letter was supposed to go out to parents prior to the child reading the book. And I knew Mr. Franzen, my son's English teacher, was planning on reading the book in mid-November at Indian Trail. Then about a week later, my son Joe came home from school and said he saw a lot of 9th grade students walking around with the Book of Mice and Men. And after speaking with Mr. Franson, he told me the 2 other English teachers at Indian Trail had already started the book. But as a courtesy, he chose to wait until the letter was sent out in advance to the parents of the students in his English classes. I was extremely disappointed that half of Indian Trail would do one thing while the other half did another, considering Dr. All's recommendations were universal to all parents in all schools who had not yet read the book. To make a long story short, I finally received a copy of the draft letters written by Kay Haas, and on November 14th, I received my own personal copy from Mrs. Marion, which was sent to the parents at Indian Trail regarding the Book of Mice and Men and other books to be read at the school. To my dismay, there was absolutely nothing in the letter from the school that described the profanity and the coarse nature of Mice and Men. Instead, there was this flowery, one-sided view of all the books listed. The only negative mention was that some objectionable words may appear in some of the listed books. Again, I was extremely disappointed with the school system and felt that they intentionally failed to inform parents of the true nature of the book and others on the list. I have an article right here, and I can get a copy to you guys later. This article explains that there is a constitutional protection for parental rights, regarding parental rights. In other words, parents are to be informed of the complete and true nature of what their kids are reading at school. The Constitution limits the use of state power, mainly the school system, to diminish parental rights and undermine the family. And although the Constitution does not deal explicitly with parental authority, the Supreme Court of the United States does, and has specifically recognized parental rights of custody and control in several cases, one being the Meyer case, where the court states that the right of parents to raise their children free from unreasonable state interference is one of the unwritten liberties protected by the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. The court stated in the Pierce case, which is another case originating from this constitutional law, that Oregon state law requiring parents to send their children to public schools interfered with the liberty of the parents to direct the upbringing and the education of children under their control. So why do I mention all this? I say this because Dr. All and I had a little chat, and I asked her to have her staff recreate the letter with a fair and balanced description of all the books the kids are to be reading in the school system. I also told Dr. All that I wanted to evaluate the paragraphs written about each book to make sure that this time they were true and accurate. As you can see, I and all of the parents in the Olathe school system have a right to clearly know the content of the material in a book that our children are reading in the school system. They also have a right to opt out of any book that the parent finds objectionable. As long as this gets done, you won't see me next month. However, if it doesn't, I will be here demanding parental rights and a consent form for books to be clearly, the truth of each book to be clearly described to parents so that they're truly informed of what their child is reading at school. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Leone. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board? Yes, please come forward. State your name and address.
My name is Amy Martin. I live at 12281 South Renee Street. I'm also the parent of a 9th grader, and I'd like to address Ms. Leone's comments tonight. The books that my 9th grader read this year were made available to me at the back-to-school night in August, I believe. And the teacher also invited my husband and I to discuss with her any issues we had about the curriculum when we went to visit with her at our student-teacher conferences in October. I feel that the efforts to notify parents about very specific items in certain books is, quite frankly, a waste of our staff's time and a waste of taxpayer money. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board? Okay, seeing none, we'll declare the public comments portion of our agenda closed. And board members, I need to digress from our planned agenda for just a little bit again, if you'll bear with me, on action item 7.01, dealing with the City of Olathe partnership proposal. We're actually not going to take action on that item until after our executive session, but Dr. All would like to make some introductory remarks to that, and we have some folks who have come tonight who will address that issue, and honoring their schedule, we're going to, if you have no objection, we'll move to that.
Thank you. This evening, we have received a letter from Michael Wilkes, city manager, also copied to the mayor, city council, and their attorney, requesting that the school board convey in an agreement the dedication of the right-of-way from the school district to the city on a private road or private portion of Valley Road. This is a road that the school district constructed as part of the CBAC complex when that was first created several years ago. Because of the Bioscience Authority and the K-State campus, the city and that area would desire this to be a public road now. And in our efforts for consultation over the last few days, we have the letter for you to consider. It also includes in the letter for that dedication of the right-of-way a reimbursement to the district for the original cost of the land on the roadway, and it will also ask for a partial release of the interlocal agreement between the city and the school district. And what the city is asking for is that originally in that interlocal agreement, that land was going to be parkland as a proposal, and they need to have that changed in order to clear up the projects moving forward. While that would change in the interlocal agreement, all the other conditions and protections for codes and assurances that the school district have would remain. And then, in addition, the agreement would indemnify the school district from liabilities associated with the ball fields that are adjacent to the road, which, since it's a private road right now, we control, being a public road, that would change the manner and the amount of traffic there. The board received an attached map showing that area. We have here tonight our city manager, Michael Wilkes. We also have Michael, you might want to stand, and a representative from Kent State University, Bob Krause, is here. He's also in the back. And Michael, would you like to add any additional comments? If you do, you might want to come down center and to the podium, please.
Thank you, Dr. All. Mr. President, members of the board, I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. We're excited about the project. I would mention that in addition to Dr. Bob Krause, who is the Vice President for Institutional Affairs at Kansas State University, we also have Jan Catahenry, who's the CFO and Chief Operating Officer for the Kansas Bioscience Authority, and let's see, Gary Michael, who I have not met yet, but I believe is also works for the Bioscience Authority specifically on this project. So I'd like to introduce them. Just real briefly, and then I'd be happy to stand for any questions that you might have to help with the project. I believe we've had the opportunity to brief the board on this project a couple of different times. We're excited about the project. We, as I've said publicly and would continue to say, I think this is a watershed project for the city of Olathe. I think it will forever change some of the dynamics of our community. It speaks to a lot of the things that we're about as a community and you're about as a school board, building 21st century jobs, bringing educational opportunities and bioscience opportunities to our community, which will, I think, forever change our future. We've been very, very fortunate with Kansas Bioscience Authority and K-State that we've already landed one big announcement. You've heard Fort Dodge Animal Health will build all their research and development facilities for all around the country. They're going to be moving to this facility. It's about a $40 million project, and it's coming. Probably will get built next year, and we'll be here. We have another big project that we can't announce yet, but will probably be announced in the first quarter of 2008. So a lot of exciting things happening there. I think we've got a partnership that we're going to forge with K-State and the Bioscience Authority with the school district. I believe Mr. Dan Henry, who wasn't able to come tonight, who's going to be the chief guy there on site, has also called Dr. All and has started to build those relationships both on behalf of Kansas State University and the Bioscience Authority. So and a very, very exciting project. The one thing that we really need to make it all happen right now is a little piece of road that you guys built as a private road. That we need to be a public road. So that's really what it's all about. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I don't know if Bob or Jan, either one, want to speak. So.
While Bob's coming forward, I would say that we have begun to discuss preliminarily some exciting opportunities, having the availability of Kansas State University very near to our campuses and their presence in the Olathe School District, as well as the Bioscience Authority and some potential opportunities there. With our 21st Century High Schools programs, there's tremendous alignment, not only with the university's focus and vision for the future, but also with the Bioscience Authority. And I think there's nothing but opportunity here, as well as the opportunity for increasing the tax base, which, although the school district does not get any additional dollars from the increase of the tax base because we are funded differently, it does provide enhanced property tax benefits for our taxpayers as these projects come forward for Olathe to support the services in this particular area. So I've worked with both of these individuals and feel like that we have identified some of the key components, that this is doable, and we'll discuss this from a legal perspective a little bit later and would request then the board take action later this evening. And so then Bob?
Dr. All and President Gilmore, members of the board, just appreciate an opportunity to extend from K-State our gratitude for the partnership that the City of Olathe, the school district, and others, stakeholders in the community, have extended to us. It's one of the things that the last 18 months have been involved in a myriad of details, and I think we're finally down to that last detail area. And I can honestly say in all the 30-some years that I've worked in executive leadership in higher education, I've never been involved in a project that has brought so many people together, focused on a common mission, and understanding the essence of partnership. And I got here a little early tonight and had the pleasure of observing the active involvement of your community with you as a board and with your entire district. And I must tell you, that doesn't happen everywhere. And I think in part it's the tone that you set, and it's a great country we're in. Because I think parents are such a vital part of education, and everybody has the same mission. And people have different perspectives, and we bring them together and work hard to find solutions. And that's what this partnership has been all about, and I just wanted an opportunity to say thank you. And we appreciate your consideration, and we're very hopeful on closing tomorrow. And I'm goading Dennis Patterson, who we've hired to do our oversight on the special benefit district. I want him out there with a shovel here real soon, before the next snow. But thank you. If you have any questions about any of the programs we're looking at, I know Dr. Dan Richardson, who will be our CEO of the K-State Olathe Innovation Campus, and Dr. All and others have begun those initial conversations, and I think we might have some very unique opportunities on the horizon.
Great.
Thank you,
Bob.
I'll be very short and very brief, but I just want to say the Kansas Bioscience Authority is very excited about this opportunity and the plans and the companies that will be involved in the collaborative nature of the whole park. So thank you for having us.
Great. Thank you for your comments. Thank you, Mr. Wilkes. Are any questions or comments from board members at this time? Okay, well, we appreciate your being here tonight.
Thank you.
With that, we'll move back to Section 5 of our agenda, dealing with the consent agenda. We have 11 items on our consent agenda tonight. Is there anything on the agenda that a board member has a question on or wishes to have removed for separate consideration? If not, we'll entertain a motion for approval.
Mr. Gilmore, I just had one question about 5.08.
Okay, Mr. Parker.
Which is the dissolution of our agreement with Greenbush. So Do we have a timeline for the development, expansion, and enhancement of our career programs and what we intend on that looking like? Have we began to develop that? Dr. Shirk?
Well, we've been very excited in Career and Tech Ed to see the new tech center approved in the bond, so certainly we're working on plans around that. This is one component of beginning to move forward on that process. We've been working with the service center and the architects and just some very preliminary plans, and then look forward to having that move forward as fast as it needs to.
I don't want to micromanage it as a board member, but I know Mr. Pullen and I were on the original site review committee, and I would like to continue to be a part of that, and would invite Mr. Pullen to do the same. And so when you have upcoming meetings, would you notify us of that so we can participate in that as well?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Welcome your participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shirk.
Mr. Gilmore, I move that we approve the consent agenda items as listed.
Second. I'm sorry, second.
Been moved by Mr. Churchman, seconded by Mr. Parker. Any further discussion? Mrs. Carpenter?
Mr. Churchman?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilhelm? Yes. Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
And that motion passes. Thank you.
Mr. President, I'd like to just make a couple comments on the
Go ahead, Mr.
editing
Poland.
and public comment. I want to thank Dr. All for providing all the information she did about that, since we are treading new ground here. But just for the people that weren't familiar with the issue, I'd like to clarify that the speaker whose talk was edited was not using words maliciously, just so the people that weren't familiar with it, but she was merely reading from the disputed books. But our community standards dictate to us that these words not be repeated on our broadcast. And I feel our decision to approve the editing of the public comments was the correct and right thing to do. But I do find it troubling and somewhat ironic that the accepted community standards and our own board policy make it necessary to censor the words of a mother which were spoken as she read a book that is used as an accepted and approved book by this Board of Education. It's funny how we worry about the supposed censorship of the words of an author, but we don't worry about actually censoring the words of one of our own stakeholders as she reads those very same words of that author. I think that's a little bit of an inconsistency that I think deserves further attention from this board. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Poland. I'd also like to clarify for everyone that this was an editing for rebroadcast of the comments, not an editing of the record of the comments. The comments stand in the record as they were spoken. Action 6 deals with bids, contracts, and agreements. We have 3 items on this set of action items. Are there any questions, comments, or items that need to be specifically addressed? Mr. Parker?
I'll defer to I have one question, but I will wait for someone
Go right
else's.
ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to ask Dr. Letcher in regards to the RFP on the comprehensive classification and compensation strategy study. What are the expected outcomes, and frankly, what do we expect to get for our $65,000?
Mr. Parker, we would expect to get job descriptions would be one outcome. We would also expect to get salary information, accurate salary information. What the study will do is use the job descriptions to determine the value of each job in terms of, based on certain factors in that job description, how much should that particular position be paid. In addition to using the information from the job description to establish salary, the study will also use market data. So using those 2 pieces of data, the study will come up with a very accurate salary for each of our positions. In addition to that information, we're also going to get information on staffing levels for our classified positions. So this company that's doing the study has a large database in terms of staffing levels of other school districts for positions, and they will look at our school district's staffing in relation to those other school districts. So we're going to get some, I think, very useful information that's going to allow us to attract and retain quality staff.
I want to correct the record. I said 65,000. That was the amount that was budgeted, but the RFP is for 51,995. So
that is correct.
Right. I just want to make sure that we get some results as a result of the investment of this money, and it's going to make a difference for us long term in regards to our classified staff.
I think it definitely will, Mr. Parker.
One thing I might add is that Dr. Letcher and I and other staff members talked about this in great detail for an extensive period of time. I think we forget we have over 4,000, about 4,200 employees. We're the 14th largest employer in the metropolitan area. And when we began to try to look at some inequities of positions, salaries, we've incrementally grown for so many years without ever having a systems approach to this, and we're going to continue to grow. And it's really hard to strategically decide who's doing what we need to have done. And as we reviewed this, we just felt like we needed that assistance from outside, that we did not have the internal staff or the expertise to look at this objectively and benchmark it. And so I'm hopeful that this helps set us with a plan going forward. And I have spoken to some staff members to say there may be some recommendations for a certain position descriptions to have enhanced salaries. That may not happen overnight, but it's at least a plan that we can begin moving towards as we make decisions about our resources.
What's the timeline for the study, and also will they remain on board in consultation?
The study, Mrs. Wilhelm, takes between 16 and 18 weeks to complete. Would be our intention to bring to the January board the contract. After we receive board approval on that, the study would start, so we'd anticipate that it'd be completed April, May, and the contractor will provide continued assistance after the study is completed.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Letcher, I had a question regarding, we ended up with only one respondent to this request that actually submitted a bid, but we mentioned 2 other school districts that had used their services in recent time. Do we know what they paid for that service? Is it comparable to the amount of this contract?
Mr. Gilmore, we are familiar with what the other school districts paid, and it is very
It's in line
comparable.
with this?
In fact, I would say that our price is very favorable.
Good. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, we'll entertain a motion to approve those items.
Mr. Gilmore, I move to approve bids, contracts, and agreements as listed.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Churchman, seconded by Ms. Ashley. Any further comments or questions? Mrs. Carpenter?
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilhelm?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Mr. Churchman?
Yes.
And that motion passes. We're on to 7.02 relating to the adoption of a strategic plan on bullying, and we will have that presentation that I've asked to defer a little while ago now.
While they're coming up, I will also mention that you did adopt a bullying policy, anti-bullying policy, based on the change in the statute after July 1, and part of that, the second part of that, is to have a plan that goes along with that, and that's what you're going to be hearing tonight. And we'd like to have action on that tonight, although it could be deferred to January 10th, but technically we should have it in place even though there's 3 days just before the January 10th of school. So I'll have staff here to give you an overview of what they've been working on these last few months.
Thank you, Dr. All. Mr. President, members of the board. I'm Heather Schoonover, facilitator of Safe and Drug-Free Schools and Youth Friends. And this is Mr. Katzeff, principal at California Trail, and we appreciate your time and listening to what we've worked on with a committee under the leadership of Nancy Keith on our bullying prevention plan. I wanted to give you a quick recap. Last April, the Kansas legislature voted on House Bill 68, and there's 4 points. One, a district is to develop a policy. You can see that check mark. You've done that in October. Implement a plan. That's what we're reviewing today. The key is to provide students and staff training on the policy and the plan. And then, if need be, work with KSDE on character ed programs. All to be done by January 1st, 08. In Olathe, we really wanted to look at a comprehensive community-wide approach, establish uniform awareness of what our policy is and our plan, take a look at some prevention strategies. As you can see, it says bullying, and also the key word there is cyberbullying. We have done a lot of work with our CO3 efforts. The state strictly stated bullying, but we went one step ahead and included cyberbullying.
Our Olathe Bully Prevention Program outlines responsibilities of the entire staff, the training that would go into staff and students, education of students, parents and community as partners, and resources for elementary and secondary K through 12. And again, the CO3 curriculum that we have in place already, cyber safety curriculum. And this is your part.
We just wanted to strictly, that's just what we had approved in October. One thing that is on there, it's not only in the buildings, but as you can see, our policy that you reviewed and approved does include at any of our events and on school district vehicles.
We have the Bully Prevention Committee listed here. It includes people from various parts of the staff, also including 2 parents that we got from the Parent Leadership Initiative Institute that Mr. Poland and Dr. All got started, and we were part of that. And that was very excited to have those 2 parents as part of our committee.
One thing, as you can see, we also had SROs in there, so people from the city staff, and it wasn't only administrators, classified staff were in there, so a full continuum committee.
The bully prevention plan also includes an obvious definition of bullying, including the dynamics between the bully, the victim target, and the bystander. And it also includes and outlines responsibilities for all Olathe personnel, counselors, what their role in the process is, school administrators, bus drivers, classified staff, and adult volunteers. And these are outlines of what all personnel are expected to do. A lot of the things in the plan are in place. What's really good about having a bully prevention policy and plan, it brings focus and emphasis on what we want to do with bullying in our schools and to train staff on awareness and parents and students and bring everybody together. So all personnel will receive, they already do, receive professional development regarding issues of bullying. They're expected already to be role models showing respect, provide a safe learning environment in all areas in the facility and outside activities, including all school activities, and the necessary supervision needed there. And to respond promptly and notify administration. And again, we have in our curriculum that computer teachers and other staff have the CO3 curriculum that they deliver to the students. Counselors will collaborate with school administration. A lot of times students report to teachers or counselors, and then we collaborate together with building administrators regarding any suspected or reported bullying incident. Also, counselors provide character education and bully prevention information to staff, students, and parents. That's also in collaboration with building administrators. And you'll see later that there's curriculum resources regarding bullying that we have listed in the PowerPoint and also in the plan. Administration is very important because we set the tone for our building and our climate, in our school climate. And We always educate our students and staff on the Olathe guiding principles, particularly respect in this issue. Also, we follow guidelines in the student code of conduct as far as discipline reports and any reported bullying incidents. We follow the guidelines outlined there. We also involve the SRO when it's appropriate, and our SROs are really good educators as well as law enforcement agents. They can educate students and parents about the legal issues regarding bullying. And of course, administrators need to assure that there's supervision and security at all events and activities and throughout the school day, and that we educate parents and patrons about the Olathe parent-patron guiding principles as well. Bus drivers, classified staff, and volunteers will take steps to intervene as observed bullying incidents occur. Bus drivers are already required to turn in incident reports of any behavior that is inappropriate, and they deliver that to the building administrators. We just want to make sure we have a focus on bullying as well. Education, we want to make sure that there's annual professional development regarding bullying to all staff, including not just teachers, but all classified staff and volunteers, anybody that is around students in our school programs. And that it's comprehensive, and that we create awareness for parents and patrons of the district about the issues of bullying and what our plan is for bullying. And I'll turn that back to you.
All right. The committee looked at a lot of resources. We went to training over in Topeka with KSDE, and they also gave us some state resources, and we looked at those and implemented that as resources. Some of them, as you can see, can be used at any level. This is what the state has, but also we broke it down into some options that would be really nice for elementary and secondary levels. I don't want you to forget our activities in athletics. Mr. Ader has already been using Champions of Character. That's key to character education. We need to continue with that in these bullying prevention efforts on and off the court. There'll be some resources and books for our staff and parents. And again, we can all utilize the CO3 program. We want to end here by saying, just like Dr. Banikowski said in that transition, okay, what's going to happen? We'll have professional development. We have a policy. We're going to educate the staff. But again, we will have a resource on the shelf of this plan for all our schools. So no matter who comes into the building, when you see a bullying incident, you can pick that. You know we're all on the same page with our bullying prevention efforts. We've always had Olathe's guiding principles, but I think we want to leave here. We're talking about bullying prevention, but really, Olathe and our district wants to be a district of character. Any questions?
I don't hear any. Any questions from board members or comments? Thank you for the presentation. We have a recommendation before us under 7.02 to approve the bullying prevention awareness plan as presented. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the bullying prevention awareness plan as presented.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Ashley, seconded by Dr. Daniels. Any further discussion? Mrs. Carpenter.
Mr. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Ms. Wilhelm?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Mr. Churchman?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
That motion passes. 7.03 on the potential sale of property. I believe, Dr. All, you're going to make some remarks regarding this item, along with maybe Mr. Houghton.
Both Mr. Houghton or myself can address some of the questions that might come from this. If you'll recall, this is a bid on our former Prairie Learning Center, which was formerly a church that we sort of converted or modified into a site, a program site. And once that program moved to the new facility on the Olathe Northwest campus last spring, then this facility became available. We did evaluate whether or not we had any use for it as a school district. It has significant limitations, and it was our recommendation to the board that we attempt to sell it. This doesn't happen often, that we try to, sell property. And as you noted from the information we received after advertising and whatever, one bid on that. Staff has sort of benchmarked that and evaluated, would be very comfortable accepting that bid. However, I've given you 3 options there: to accept the bid, which staff would support, to continue to try and sell the property ourselves. That may or may not make any difference. We may lose this particular bidder. I'm not sure what additional interest there might be there, or to employ a real estate company to sell the property, which does have some additional fees associated with it. We wished we had more than one bidder on this, but we didn't. I think we could stand for any specific questions about the facility or this bid, and our staff would be able to respond to that.
Just out of curiosity, what's the acreage of this property and what did we originally pay for it?
Acreage is 4.64 acres. Of that 4.64 acres, most of it is unusable. And we paid, the original price was $462,500.
How long do we use the facility?
We think about 8 years.
I had a question on, and maybe Mr. Diener is the best to answer this question. The use of these funds, when they're, if it was sold and if we agreed to this contract, where do they go and how are they used?
This would need to go back into the capital outlay fund.
Capital outlay, okay. So then it's just available for anything we might do there?
Correct.
Okay.
Did we obtain a commercial appraisal on the property in connection with putting it for sale? And is the bid consistent with the appraised value?
We received an appraisal. The appraisal was $580,000. It is not consistent with the bid. The appraisal does not take in consideration the cost to prepare our land site. An example of this particular situation where you have that particular appraisal was one of the problems we've always had with that particular site. It only has 23 parking spots. There is no way to improve that unless we would get permits to somehow put culverts in, because it is surrounded by creeks on 3 sides. It would require a considerable amount of water movement and handling a situation. Any further than that, Greg's going to have to help, because we went right past my knowledge after that particular comment on that situation.
Thank you.
If we were to list it with a realtor, what would we expect to be the real estate commission selling cost of that then? If we were to, what's the percentage they want, 7?
Normal, we could probably get 6%. The situation that would be on an extended single operation, it would not be multiple real estate people for that particular situation. We would have to go probably for a 90-day contract, maybe a 60-day contract, but your real estate fees, we think we could probably get for 6%. We would have to, board would have to give some guidance on how we would decide to pick a particular real estate company.
Did we get any feedback from the other bidders as to why they did not submit a bid?
We did not ask, but to some of the general ideas is this particular situation from a long time ago is zoned residential, which would mean in that particular situation you would be able to have some kind of a schooling system and some kind of a church system. Some of the situations did go downtown and have a discussion about zoning, and the amount of time and money and effort, I think, might have distracted some of them. Other ones were churches. And I think there's some other churches that might be for sale, and I think when they looked at the pricing and so forth, that might have been a situation for them.
So, Mr. Houghton, in addition to the zoning challenges that this piece of property would have, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's also got any kind of future development challenges to a certain degree, as far as the fact that it's got two creeks going around it, and there's limitations as far as what this could become in the future from a potential buyer. Is that correct?
That is correct. The site development of it, meaning that what you do with that particular building and how you expand the use of that particular area to get the 4 acres. In that location, 4 acres is a nice site. In order to utilize that entire nice site, it would take some money invested to make the site usable for the entire 4.5 acres.
So that, coupled with the zoning issue, would that be a reasonable explanation for the, excuse me, the lack of bids that we've received on it, potentially?
It could be. There were some commercial, we kept a list of everybody that we contacted. Anybody that contacted us, we contacted them multiple times through email or phone to keep them abreast of what we were doing and what our plans were. And after the board made, we contacted our board, and then we told them that it was, we advertised, we put the property or for sale sign in front of that particular area. That's the reason we asked for several months to pursue the option. As Dr. All pointed out, we rarely sell property. In all of the years that I've been in my position, we haven't sold any. It's sort of new territory. On bids, we call up and ask our bidders what happened. When we don't get the bids we expect, we did not call up and ask our people that particular question on this situation.
Mr. Houghton, we've had this for sale since when, September roughly? A few months? I believe it was September we took action.
It was September something. I can't remember the exact date. I could look it up. I have it someplace.
Do you know if the buyer has submitted a contract that's contingent on financing or anything of that nature?
No, we have the contracts with us. He is prepared to close within 45 days. We were prepared to give longer, but he said he could close in 45 days. We have visited with him. He has the financing lined up. In fact, he thinks he can get it done quicker than 45 days.
Are there any zoning issues? Is a contract contingent upon a zoning issue?
Mr. Norris and I worked on this particular contract. It's kind of different because we're usually writing the other way, and this time part of the agreement was the contract had to be accepted because of we could not really negotiate back and forth because every time they would want something to change, we'd have to come back to the board. So Mr. Norris and I set up, I'll rephrase that, Mr. Norris set up the contract, and I asked a dozen questions, and he handled it, and there is no contingency clause in there. The organization that is put the bid in is a church. It was a church, and there should be, and they were told that they needed to go check, but we don't see any zoning problems with that particular situation. But even if there are zoning problems, that, based on the contractual language that Mr. Norris puts in there, does not affect this particular situation.
Mr. Houghton, what are the costs if we just continue to maintain the building?
To give you an accurate cost, we would have to hire a number of consultants, but we have on our staff a number of people who operate as construction supervisors that are fairly knowledgeable. We have HVAC and everything else. We think without developing the rest of that land, meaning we would not bridge those creeks and not be able to pick up any more parking spaces, we think, give or take, it would be $647,000. That would not include any remodeling for any new programs. It would not include any furniture and would not include any technology. So based on what program you were going to put in there would add to that particular cost. The programs that you could put in there would be extremely limited because, as an example, students could not drive because there's no place, in essence, after those 23 spaces are parked, where they would go and the staffing. So this would create some problems based on what your program is. And we did not take that into adjustment. We did not take any adjustment of increasing the utilization of the land.
The reason I asked is later on we're going to be discussing the exponential growth of early childhood disability programs, and I wondered if that site had been looking at Dr. Banikowski's face. I'm assuming that that site had been discussed and found not to be appropriate.
Prior to building the new facility, we spent a great deal of time looking at that renovation of the existing facility for it. It doesn't have an elevator, therefore it's not ADA qualified. You know, it's a very difficult building. I know that sounds like a lot of money to bring it up to sort of a standard, but it has one stair, it has some foundation issues, it has a lot of issues that would be difficult for the students that were in the building to begin with, who are high school age students. To convert it for 3- and 4-year-olds would be really a chore. And we did, before we spent the money on a new building, look at renovating that building and felt that in the long run we'd be better off building a new building.
So I guess my question is, if we were to keep it, what could we do with it? Are there any programs that it would be considered a viable location for?
Multiple senior administrators in multiple meetings have discussed what we could use that particular building for economically. And as of this date, there have been no viable thinking that what we could use the building for.
We are not in a position that we have to do something here, other than we do have a buyer, a willing and sounds capable buyer, and our staff has recommended moving forward. I would have to tell you, board members, my gut to this is I think we should wait. I think we should hire a commercial realtor to evaluate and list the project and see if we can't do better than what's been proposed. I don't see any harm in that, other than the potential of losing a buyer who's already here and willing, but we've only had one offer on the property at this point. $462,000 we paid 8 years ago versus $400 now, and I'm not sure where the appraisal came from. That's $580, but all of that causes me conflict enough to want to just wait, and I don't see harm in waiting, other than we do have a contract in front of us, and I don't suppose I'd lose sleep either way, but that's just my gut reaction to this personally.
It doesn't hurt to wait, and maybe if the buyer's anxious, he might increase his offer.
He's not going to give that away by his face, I can tell you that.
One thing I was going to ask Mr. Houghton, would there be some potential benefit if we explored with the city getting that zoning changed from residential to commercial before we sold it, because it has commercial around it, so a potential buyer might want to be converting that to commercial?
I'll take a shot at that.
Okay.
To get it rezoned, we would have to have a use. In other words, we would have to have some sort of commercial use in mind before we could get it rezoned. Rezoned to be a convenience store, rezoned to be, we can't just get
Some
it
type of a
changed.
site plan as well.
Some kind of a site plan, some sort of traffic plan, a traffic study. We just can't get it changed from R to C. We're going to have a use, a C use, before we can get it changed.
Can the city change it? Or is that always coming
No,
from the owner?
That would be up to them. That's their UDO and that's their policy and those are their ordinances. I have not, it's been our experience that to change from residential to commercial, you have to have a use. Basically, you can't just say, I want that to no longer be residential, it's got to be commercial. Now, could we invent a use? That's what developers do many times. Could we have a proposed use that we think we might be able to sell it as and put together some sort of plan and move that ahead? Yes, ma'am, we could do that. But
I
does
would,
that-
I
does
would
that help
propose
us or
that's
hurt
not our
us?
business,
Yeah,
so I would
that's
propose
what
we
I
not
say.
head
We're
that
in the
way.
business of educating young people, not real estate development, and that takes us into also, that isn't gonna rezoning the property isn't gonna happen for free. We're gonna have some money that we have to invest with architects and consultants to get that done.
Well, I think probably the best use for the site as is obviously a church facility or something para-church related, something like that. But I still have those same conflicts in moving forward tonight, and I don't know where the rest of you stand, but that's where I am.
Just thinking about that site and Prairie, I believe it's Prairie Center Road there, West Santa Fe. So would the city have any ideas of intentions of widening that there and putting turn lanes in from 7 to Montclair?
We are not currently aware of anything, but that could be checked on.
Okay.
Can a potential buyer come forward and ask for that rezoning with then their purpose?
Certainly they could.
So that is a possibility, that even though it's zoned, someone may see it as a different use.
I think they could. I think Mr. Houghton hit upon it. The problem with it is while it looks like 4.46 acres on a map, much of it is very difficult to use for anything, and I think that's probably why many commercial developers looked at it and passed. One, the neighborhood that it's in, which while there may be commercial near it, it's not a highly commercialized part of town at this point. And I think that probably the commercial developers at this point looked at it and when it's very difficult to develop to get anything out of it to be much larger than it is right now. But I don't know that. I haven't worked for a developer in a long time.
There's a super Walmart being developed right next to it.
There is, and we would have thought that would have made it more valuable, but obviously it didn't to many people. So we could just say.
But there's a huge ravine. You have to have a Sherman tank to get from the Super Walmart to the site. Yeah. Mr. Gilmore, I respect what you're saying, but I kind of sometimes feel like a bird in the hand is better than a bird in the bush. So I'm inclined to follow staff's recommendation and to move on from this and to put the money in capital outlay and go forward with it.
I'll say this about the site. It's typically one that lends itself, Mr. Gilmore, as you've indicated, to a church environment, and I think it takes a unique kind of church to move onto a site where there's not a lot of future expansion potential, particularly given this section of the area. So, I think the cost to just hold it idle is probably minimal, insignificant. So I'm indifferent either way, but I think that we're going to find this as a challenged environment for a future sale.
Well, then make me feel better if you're going to approve this tonight and raise the price to $425. And I'll support the motion. We have to do this in public, folks.
I'm in favor of that, absolutely.
Jen says we can't.
So what you're talking about, Mr. Gilmore,
I'm talking about countering the contract offer is what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
Mr. Houghton seems to be falling off his chair there. We counter?
Well, we probably have a contract that's subject to our approving it the way it is, and if we counter, obviously, that it technically negates the contract offer, but.
As much as I like Greg sitting next to me, I sure like to have Mike sitting next to me right now, but my thinking is that we put out and said we would do a sealed bid, and based on how we advertise, the board would accept or reject.
Good point.
In a real estate situation, then you negotiate back and forth. But on a sealed bid, I think...
You're good. I respect that. I'd forgotten that's how we did it.
I'm not sure.
I think you're
we're
right.
over my head on
We
that
said we
legal
were going to
point.
accept or reject based on the sealed bids, and that's, so I'll withdraw my comment to do that, but. So we're back to whether we think it's acceptable or not acceptable and want to do something different.
I think the building has served its purpose for us, and we obviously can't use the building. We have replaced it in usage, and I would agree with Mr. Parker. We should move forward with the sale.
Well, I'll call the question. That's amazing. We can spend $50 million in about 5 seconds.
We studied that a lot longer, trust me.
For about 30 minutes. I'd move that we would accept the bid as proposed for the Prairie Center site at $400,000.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Parker, seconded by Mr. Poland, to accept the contract offer as proposed. Any further discussion? Mrs. Carpenter?
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilhelm?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Mr. Churchman?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore?
I'm going to vote no this time. And that motion carries. All right, 7.04, related to our legislative positions. Dr. George, did you wish to make some remarks regarding this?
This is a process that we go through each year, and we begin in September or October with reviewing the existing positions and then moving forward with accepting suggestions and ideas and trying to craft those into a document. Eventually, we like to adopt this document in December so that we're ready to go forward with communication to our legislators, and we have one of those meetings coming up next week. And then we're also ready to go for the with a legislative session in January. We have tried to pull these things together for you. You have copies there that have been made available to you, and so we're at that point where we do need to take action so that we can go forward.
Any comments or questions?
I have a comment, Mr. Gilmore. First off, thanks to Dr. George and the staff for doing this. I think putting the priority list on the front page is a great idea, and thank the board for their consideration on that. One item I would throw out to the board for consideration, I don't consider it to be an imperative by any stretch, but I do believe that as we look through the legislative positions, those that represent philosophical or fundamental beliefs and longer-term actions versus trying to get things that are maybe more actionable in the short term. I would ask for consideration of adding item number 9 under funding, which is the consolidation issue of some of our funding accounts, to the priority list as well, just to give it that heightened sense of visibility. Once again, not to say that's an imperative.
I could be supportive of that, Mr. Churchman. That wouldn't be an issue as far as that's concerned. I'm wondering if, you know, looking at the our 5 items that we selected for priority issues this year, which were the back there, second enrollment count, bilingual special education, high enrollment weighting, multi-year school finance plan, and at-risk funding. Based on what we heard this evening in regards to all-day kindergarten, I just thought of this evening, and what would we think about adding that as one of our priorities instead?
Which one was that, Mr. Parker?
It would be.
What number was that?
It would be number 7, under ancillary issues, which would be a voluntary all-day kindergarten.
I could be supportive of that, but only if it contains a statement that it's receiving the appropriate amount of funding at the state level. I don't think we want them to say, do this unless they're going to pay for it.
If we look at that issue, not to discount any of the conversation here, that's really more of a positional statement in my mind, where we say the board supports voluntary all-day kindergarten versus maybe separating it from an issue that says let's seek all-day kindergarten across the board.
I think what's going to be proposed on all-day kindergarten, I don't know if it'll pass. It's been proposed in the past, and it never went anywhere, but is to look at a 5-year phase-in of $15 million a year by the state. The issue with that is that there will probably, if it were to pass under a 5-year phase-in, there would probably be more demand for kindergarten services before you could provide the facilities. And this particular position does have facility implications beyond just the funding to pay for the teacher. But once again, it's probably one of those things that's going to happen. It's a matter of when, not whether. And I don't know if it'll happen this year or if it'll be at some other point in the year, in the future.
I would ask the board to consider one more issue on the priorities, and that's a multi-year school finance plan. I think I have a heightened awareness of the verbiage there as a result of being at the KASB convention this weekend. I would prefer, under multi-year school finance plan, that we strike the first sentence and that position merely say the board supports a practice or policy of maintaining a multi-year finance plan on a going basis so the district can appropriately plan for the future. And the reason I suggest that is the way I'm looking at this and the way I read it, I believe that it kind of connotes a cutoff point. We add 1 year to the 3-year plan and we're done. And I want to convey to the legislature that we support a multi-year finance plan, whether that's 2 years or 3 years, whatever that number is, that we support that rolling multi-year plan on an ongoing basis, and do not want to suggest that we add 1 year to the 3-year plan and we're done.
I would agree, and I also think it ought to be the first one listed.
I could go for that as well. I think it's a very important message to deliver.
All right, I need to try to manage this process. Hang on. I want to go back to Mr. Churchman's comment first and get a read from the board about adding what number was that, Jim? I'm sorry.
It's number 9 under
number
funding.
9 to the list. I think we're going to have to take these one at a time to try to see if there's consensus, yes or no, and then come back to Ms. Ashley's.
Mr. Gilmore, why don't we just take them item by item and just do them by a motion, and that way we could move forward.
Okay, so we'll look at unexpended funds. You're talking about the proposed amendments. Let's look at the unexpended funds, which is item 9. And I guess I'll look for a motion to add that to the priority list on the first page.
Mr. Gilmore, I move that we add item number 9, unexpended funds listed under funding, to the first page of our legislative priorities.
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Churchman and seconded by Mr. Parker to move item 9, unexpended funds, to the priority page. Any further discussion? Mrs. Boham?
I just would, Mr. Diener, if I could ask you to just reflect a little bit. Do you see this as, I know Jim, you've talked for a long time about the large number of funds to be able to have more flexibility in that. Do you see the ramifications of that in support, or can you speak a little bit to looking at this possibility? I know it was put into place, or I'm going to assume that it was put into place to act as a safeguard for how districts are managing their funds. Is that correct?
I might just reflect a little bit on the cash basis discussions that we've had in the past, where we've broken the funds into the restricted funds and the unrestricted, so dependent funds. That flexibility that the board has, and at year end, and knowing that at year end we have the flexibility to move funds to those dependent funds for cash balances for use in future years, really provides us the flexibility that we need. From an ongoing day-to-day basis, maintaining all of those funds is difficult at times, and provides extra challenges that wouldn't need to be there if we didn't have 50 funds to manage versus a limited number. But from the perspective of bringing them all together to provide more flexibility of how to use those funds, I'm not sure that the value for that is as significant, because I don't believe that there would ever be, well, and I shouldn't say there should never be because I can't speak for the legislature, but I would think that there would always be some criteria that would say if funds were raised for bond and interest, then they could only be used for bond and interest. And so I don't think that those kind of funds will ever be allowed to be used for other purposes. So with that in mind, I guess the flexibility issue is not one of flexibility, but more of convenience of local school districts to manage the funds in a way that's less confusing to not only themselves, but explaining it to the board and the community.
So this issue isn't about bond and interest money. It's about taking those funds that are more innocuous in nature and looking to consolidate those into a smaller number of accounts so we can use it for what the taxpayers have given it to us for, and that's education. So it doesn't contemplate circumventing some of those more atypical type funds, like bond and interest being one. And I think to the extent that we have lesser restrictions rather than more, it's certainly in our favor. But, you know, so I think we have agreed, although we can certainly change it, that it is part of the legislative package that we're going to put forward. It's a matter of just bringing additional visibility to it, is what the genesis of my motion is.
I would just ask out of curiosity, when we tabulated the results, where did this rank? Since we asked the staff to come, you know, we asked you guys to prepare this list in a certain procedure. If it was a close second, I would say yeah. If it was a distant.
There were a number of other items that were ranked higher than this that were not listed. I mean, I can't give you the exact counts, but probably the next one was No Child Left Behind, the unfunded mandate. It was the only federal position in, and you could add that as a federal position even separate to this. Another comment on the unexpended funds, and we didn't discuss this very clearly before, but one of the issues with the funds is also asking for greater flexibility and reduction of restrictions within those funds, so that whether it's capital outlay, perhaps expanding to include more technology support staff that are doing technical work like they do maintenance, and in some cases like at-risk funding where we're restricted to not using professional development, which training is important out of at-risk monies. So, you know, this is a concept that we maybe haven't talked about in the real depth of a plan both ways, both in looking at fewer funds, but also in keeping more local control within those funds. And, you know, I'm supportive of it being in the platform because I think we need to talk about this. And, but it was not the next several ones in board priorities on the process that you asked for. Yeah.
Thank you.
To be more specific, Mr. Poland, we had 2 board members indicated that was a priority out of the rest of us did not.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion. Any further discussion? Mrs. Carpenter.
Mr. Poland?
No.
Mrs. Wilhelm?
No.
Ms. Ashley?
No.
Mr. Churchman?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
No.
Mr. Gilmore?
No.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Okay, and that motion fails. Let's move to the second one, which was, I'm sorry, I've lost it. Who made that second?
All-day kindergarten.
All-day kindergarten, yes, Dr. Daniels. Or was it Mr. Parker? I can't remember who. The all-day kindergarten comment, that was you, Mr. Parker.
Based on the comment that Dr. George just mentioned, I would withdraw that comment, and I'm satisfied with where it's at in the legislative position.
Okay, and the last one was a change to the wording that Ms. Ashley proposed.
I would move that under the priority of multi-year school finance plan that we strike the first sentence, and the remaining sentence would read, "The board supports a practice or policy of maintaining a multi-year finance plan on a going basis so the district can appropriately plan for the future."
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Ashley, seconded by Mr. Poland. Any further discussion on the motion? Mrs. Carpenter.
Mrs. Wilhelm?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Mr. Churchman?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore,
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
Yes.
Mr. Poland.
Yes.
That motion passes. So that leads us, unless there are any other proposed changes, Dr. Daniels.
I would just, I think the key messages that we're sending here all relate to finances, and the biggest one is a multi-year school finance plan. So my thought would just be, and I don't know that, I guess it needs a motion, that we move it just to the forefront so that it's first. I mean, it is the biggest issue. It is the biggest revenue generator for the district.
Okay. Why don't you make a motion to that effect? and we'll-
Okay. I move that we move priority number 4, multi-year school finance plan, from its 4th rank to the 1st ranking.
Second.
Just to clarify, that would just involve everything else shifts down one spot, so there's no
Right.
confusion. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Mrs. Carpenter?
Miss Ashley,
Yes?
Mr. Churchman,
Yes.
Dr. Daniels,
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore,
Yes.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Poland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wilhelm.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes. So now we'll entertain a motion to adopt the entire document as amended here tonight.
I move that we adopt the state and federal legislative positions for 2008 as amended.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Ashley, seconded by Mr. Churchman to approve as amended. Any other questions or comments? Mrs. Carpenter?
Mr. Churchman,
Yes.
Dr. Daniels.
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore,
Yes.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Poland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wilhelm,
Yes.
Miss Ashley.
Yes?
The motion passes, and we have our legislative positions adopted. Thank you, Dr. George, for all your assistance in this process.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. 7.05, permanent drainage easements. Are there any questions, comments, or need for presentation on this item? I believe Mr. Thomason's available for questions if we have them. If not, we'll entertain a motion, please.
Mr. Gilmore, I move to grant, I move to grant permanent drainage easements along Woodland Road.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Churchman, seconded by Dr. Daniels. Any further discussion? Mrs. Carpenter?
Dr. Daniels,
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore,
Yes.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Poland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wilhelm,
Yes.
Miss Ashley,
Yes.
Mr. Churchman.
Yes.
The motion passes. 7.06 is an authorization for signature of the Water Quality Measurement Agreement. Again, I'll ask if there's any questions or comments on this item.
Mr. Gilmore, I'd like to propose a modification to the agreement and ask for Mr. Thomason's opinion on that. And that is to insert a clause that says the parties agree that this agreement satisfies and fulfills all obligations of the district in full.
I think it's a great idea. I think it would be wonderful if we could get that added to it.
Mr. Churchman, would you, I'm sorry, I was discussing something with Dr. All. Would you clarify one more time the language you're proposing?
Yeah, the language that I'm proposing states that the parties agree that this agreement satisfies and fulfills all obligations of the district in full. And the basic premise of that is to make sure that the agreement we enter into doesn't give the other party the right to come back at some other time and charge us incremental costs associated with what we've agreed to do.
Okay.
Second.
All right. That's a motion to approve it as amended that way. Mr. Churchman, were you making that a motion?
I am.
Okay. Mr. Poland has made the second. Any further discussion? Mrs. Carpenter?
Mr. Gilmore,
Yes.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Poland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wilhelm.
Yes.
Miss Ashley,
Yes.
Mr. Churchman,
Yes.
Dr. Daniels.
Yes.
That motion passes. We have 22 items on our future action items list for the future. And as our custom, we also ask at this point if there's any items that you have a question on or wish additional information or further direction of staff before they come to the table in a future meeting for action. I know that Dr. All wants to address 8.01, so we want to take her comments in just a second. But before we do that, I would like to ask if there's any of the other items on the list that you might have a particular question or comment or request for more information on. Okay, seeing none, Dr. All, let's go to your comments.
Yes. 8.01 is really analysis of potential ninth grade program options. As you may recall, when I provided my superintendent priorities for 2007-08 and follow up some of our work last year, that I would work with staff to try to outline any potential enhancements options for the 2008-2009 ninth graders. The principals, the high school principals, and representative junior high principals, along with Dr. Banikowski, really put together a chart that you have that I'm going to have Dr. Banikowski walk us through quickly in about a minute that identifies about 8 different options and their implications. I think one of the observations I would make is that in each of these options, there are some opportunities, in some cases minimal and others more, but there's also challenges. And those challenges you're going to see around equity, around maybe in some cases inefficiencies, and in some cases just the ability to deal with space. So we didn't come to you with a clear-cut recommendation because of some of these implications. What we need to know tonight is we're willing to go out and do further work on any one or a couple of these options. We prefer not to do it on all 8. And if you have interest, if the board doesn't have interest, then we'll go on to other things. If you do have interest in 1 or 2 or 3 of these options for us to take a further look at and bring back, we would do that at the January meeting, and we would need, depending on the option, either action at January or February if we were going to implement for 08-09. There's also a following year, 09-2010, that provides another year if some option is more extensive than others. With that said, I'm going to let her walk through the options because I think without doing that, it's kind of hard to put these together a little bit. And then we can take questions and kind of get a sense of the direction of the board and what additional interest you might have in one or more for us to come back to you. So Dr. Banikowski, you want to give us a quick walkthrough?
Yes, as Dr. Hall indicated, you can see in the chart that we tried to look at a variety of options and kind of open our minds up and also look at them compared to a variety of things such as was there expanded course offerings, was there parent choice, what are the implications for facilities and staff. You can see that there are 8 programs, options listed for you there. The first one deals with those students who are participating currently in the 9th grade enhancement program. Of course, we don't know if that might open up more students who would be interested in that, and it has some implications, of course, for the various facilities across the district. Number 2 looks at all high schools being participating and works with only the 21st century programs, but you'd also notice the underlined word identified 21st century programs. Because of some space limitations, et cetera, we would come back and propose only certain 21st century programs. Again, that had some positives and the yeses in the first 3 columns, but also had some concerns or implications that we would have to deal with, such as we might have to go to a lottery if too many students were interested in that. Plus, we would have some students that had 3-year programs, some 4-year programs. You can notice on options 3 through 7, all deal with only 2 sites, and that's Prairie Trail and Olathe Northwest. And that option came up, and then we had a variety of options for the options, if you will. And everything from the first one, number 3, that allows parent and student choice on whether they would like to take their 9th grade year at Olathe Northwest or their 9th grade year at Prairie Trail. Again, we would have to determine what numbers we're talking about before we can determine if that's cost effective and doable. You can also see on 4 and 5, there are 2 offerings related to Prairie Trail, just using an alternate site location, if you will. As you can see, there were several no's in indicating whether they had advanced options for students and choice, et cetera. You can also see on number 6, looking at students having opportunities for their electives. Again, many positives in that, in the yes columns, but there were some transportation and scheduling issues there. Number 7 is actually an alternative site location, such as you have done previously with 6th grade at some of our sites, for example, Fairview, and you had them go to a different site. You can see, however, a negative for that is no parent choice, and again has some positives, and it allows a class of students to be at the high school. Number 8, while it provides some equity across the district with all 4 high schools involved, an opportunity for kids to take their choice, if you will, to take their high school program at the high school. There are some concerns with space limitations and a possibility of a selection or a lottery process, and again, it involves all 4 sites at one time. You can notice that with the 8 options, we did provide some parameters that we would need to consider if we want to move forward with any of these to look at their viability more thoroughly. I did notice that 2 of the individuals who helped were on our big little planning committee, Dr. Gwen Poss and Stacy Yurkovich, are in the audience tonight, so if you would have any questions of them as well. So that would be a brief overview, Dr. All.
One thing that Dr. Benakowski and I were visiting about, these options are not in any kind of order for us, but there are 3 on the first page that are probably have more possibilities to them, 1, 2, and 3, than some of the others. When we wrestled with expanding 9th graders going to the 4 high schools, we don't know whether we would have a lot or few. It is the unknown of that it is bothersome there. And then if we had more than we could take, what would we do about that? And so when you come back to 1, that limits it to certain courses, building on where we already have freshmen taking some of those courses at the high school, although a limited number of freshmen, because it's the scheduling challenges of getting junior high to the high school campuses. We're on different schedules, and Oregon Trail to Olathe North is a lot of windshield time. Identifying some 21st century programs. Some are filled right now, given where they are. Others would have some space, so we'd have to come back and give you some specifics there. And then the Prairie Trail 9th grade parents choosing whether their children would take their freshman year at PRT or Olathe Northwest. The reason that's there is that Northwest has capacity of the 4 high schools. It has capacity. The downside of this, it may not have enough capacity over time if there wasn't renovations for the 9th graders coming to the high school at some point in the future, or waiting for the 5th high school. So that's an unknown if we move the entire grade level. But in this one, or if everybody chose to go. I mean, that's the extreme. That might be positive, but that's an issue. If not everyone goes, we could have some inefficiencies if too few stayed behind or too few went. So that has some workability, though. I can tell you that Stacy Yurkovich, principal at Prairie Trail, and Dr. Poss at Olathe Northwest have had a lot of conversations about that, and feel like if there was something on a shared campus concept like that, that they, working with their site councils in the school community, could make it work. The downside of that's at 1 location and it's not at the other 3. So, you can see we went back and forth on these and decided to lay this out to the best we could in a simple fashion as we could to say, what's the board's level of interest in us working to bring bring more information back on any of these.
Dr. Daniels?
I don't have a question. I have 2 comments, and the first is, 3. First,
thank you very much for providing us with these options. I know that it was a lot of work. I would not be in favor of an option like number 3. I think if we were choosing to do this, I think it's unfair and possibly not a good sample to limit it to only ninth graders at Prairie Trail. I think if we were to do this, we would want ninth graders from other buildings to have that same opportunity. But my biggest concern with all of these, and maybe this is a question, is in taking time to look at these options and possibly run with one and make it work. Are we redirecting energies away from going forward with a 6-9 reconfiguration? And it would not be my preference to do that. So I would not want, if we are doing this thinking we're piloting it, getting the bugs out, but we're still focused on moving forward, I'm okay with considering them. If it takes away from that forward vision, then I would have serious problems with it.
I guess my thoughts on that. I believe that anytime we can pilot initiatives, and I respect everything you said, so this is not in disagreement with what you said. Anytime we can pilot initiatives and gain more data and help close gaps or give people greater comfort or reinforce maybe what their beliefs may be, that's a good thing. And so the criteria that I would like to understand is what would the measurability factors be? How would we know that whatever options we may pursue would be successful? And then what would the cost and facility implications be?
I think certainly a lot of that would depend on which option we went to the next step with doing a further analysis. But as you can see from the parameters, cost-effective utilization of staff and facilities was a high priority, certainly based on what you know about some of the challenges with our budget upcoming. That was very important to us as well.
Well, the point I'm trying to make is before we would move forward or before I'd be consider moving forward, I'd like to know definitively what those plans would be. How would we measure it and what would the cost ramifications be?
It would seem then that we would need to narrow down to a couple of options so that you weren't chasing money trails across 8 of them.
And some of these will be difficult to determine cost benefit and analysis until we know what we're talking about. If, for example, we took option number 3, just as the one that you had talked about, we would have to determine how many students and families are interested in and having it at each of the sites, because it's then you can base the number on class sizes. You can determine how many students can be in different electives, what they're going to pre-enroll in, and what staffing you will need. I mean, there's all those questions. You have to have some data to work on. We can give you some rough idea if it was 50-50 or if it was, 75-25, certainly can be factors in there. But again, we felt like we didn't want to go to that amount and extent of work and beyond this until we knew if there was any interest in pursuing us to look further at a couple of these options.
I think the other point that Dr. Daniels brought up that's very valid is what is the staff resource requirement associated with doing some of these, whether it's 1 or 2, that's a concern of mine as well.
There's also possibly another consideration. You put there are some no's in these categories that probably, although they're options that are brought forth, I would think would somewhat self-eliminate. And perhaps I'm wrong on that, but if I look at those, I look at number 6, which again, I think Mr. Churchman's correct in that you would have to look at, okay, we have these students accessing their electives at one location and their core classes at another, so that would certainly take some management issues on the amount of staff that you hire. And then you look at options 1 and 2, which in option 1, it looks at those that narrow focus on those who are taking basically those classes. And option number 2 is the 21st century. Is there additional reflection by the 2 principals on discussions of 1, 2, and 6 in a balance of what that looks like?
And I will not speak for the principals if they'd like to come forward, but certainly as we go through this activity, it would be unfair of me to say that the principals didn't have perspectives on which ones they thought were more viable than others.
Before they comment, I'd like to offer my perspective on this as well. I agree with Dr. Daniels' comment regarding not wanting to lose the momentum associated with where we have agreed to move forward on the 6-9 plans. But I differ with you, Dr. Daniels, and option 3 is the one that appealed to me more, in that it seemed to me a lot of the other options either were too exclusive or had a little of this, a little of that, versus forcing everyone in the 9th grade to go, which I didn't think would be I don't think that would necessarily be popular right off the bat. So I looked at option 3 as kind of the one where we would get the most consistent example of a pilot, where we would just simply allow, assuming we had a critical mass of people who let us know early on they were interested, and I'm sure that's a part of this vetting process, that we would have a pretty homogeneous and consistent group of students all from the same area that would go down this path, and we could learn a lot from that versus trying to learn from a lot of smaller examples. That was just the perspective I have when I read through these. So that one personally appealed to me a little more. So with those comments, ladies, we'd be happy to hear what your perspectives are.
Several have been identified. Several of the options have been identified. I think I'd like to just maybe speak on in general, and then Gwen can talk a little bit more specifically on some of these that the high school principals have looked a little bit more closely at. I think in the time that Gwen and I have spent talking and looking at potential for a pilot, if you would like to call that, or a way to phase in our freshmen at the high school, number 3 and 6 provide them, or 3 and 7 would provide, am I on the same draft? There have been so many drafts. 3 and 7 would provide the best test, if you will, of what that might look like, because it would be freshmen at the high school with the opportunities to enroll in classes, to be in that high school setting. The advantage to 3 or the difference with number 3, as has already been mentioned, is that it would be a choice of parents and students to be there. And so there is already that excitement about being at the high school because they choose to be there. I think Dr. All's comment initially, a challenge with those could be, with the choice issue, could be how many decide, no, I'd rather stay at the junior high setting, and how many at the high school. And if there was a small number on either end of that, then it wouldn't be equitable, it wouldn't be cost effective, it would be a challenge to provide that freshman curriculum and that freshman experience at either site if that number was really small.
So if I understand 7 correctly, you're saying all the students would go to Olathe Northwest?
I'm saying that's correct. Number 3, where the parents and students would choose to go, or number 7, where we said freshmen will be at the high school. Those would, I think, give you the best picture of what freshmen at the high school would look like, and also the best opportunities for freshmen at the high school if the choice created enough students to actually create a freshman class.
And so my thoughts on that is I would not be in favor of that because that circumvents the community choice that still awaits us. To me, it doesn't sound like a pilot. It sounds like a mandate. But those that are more in the line of a pilot, where I think we can gather data and really go at this from a measurable perspective, or more of a measurable perspective, I would be in favor of.
Stacy, you brought up an interesting point of if we have a small number, on either end of that scale, that presents resource issues and efficiencies.
Especially with staffing.
Yeah, and I suppose if you tried to bring us more information, you're going to have to consider how we might deal with that. I'm not sure how you'd do that other than you'd have some type of a cap, which then do you have the who is and who isn't, and how do you do that equitably? I see that could be an issue, but I'm saying that, to me, it doesn't prevent us from moving forward with trying to figure that out.
I would agree. I think it also, if you have a small number, let's say that out of this 8th grade class, we had 95% of those students and parents who said, yes, I'm ready to be a freshman at the high school, leaving 5% of Prairie Trail's 8th grade class there, which we have about 300 8th graders this year. That small enrollment, if you're looking at providing the same content opportunities for them and the variations in math enrollment, in science enrollment, in English enrollment, to provide that efficiently utilizing staff would not be efficient. And then elective classes. And then you also have the social emotional piece of, if you leave behind 15 students who are the freshman class, where do they fit with that small of a number?
Well, the other challenge with doing pilots is that people a lot of times will quickly forget it's a pilot. And if you have to reverse course and go back, then, there's this entitlement feeling. So I think we have to be very careful about which of these options, if we elect to pursue anymore, as to how we would go about doing that, particularly with some of the other constraints we have in front of us.
I wasn't on the board last year when you went through a very thorough review of the pros and cons of 6-9 reconfiguration, but I have been attending feeder site council meetings, and I can tell you from attending the Olathe South feeder site council meeting that those 6th grade parents, the elementary buildings feeding into that, those 6th grade parents, for the majority, were very, very excited about moving forward. And again, I just have a real problem with identifying one location for the pilot. I think it creates bad feelings, and I think I think we need opportunities that educate all of our patrons about what they perceive to be the benefits and weaknesses of moving forward. And I think that this option, any option that limits it to one of the junior highs, very much narrows the education and the information that's shared. While in theory, I think it'd be great for all the 9th graders at Prairie Trail to go to Olathe Northwest, I'm sure that there are 9th graders at California Trail and Chisholm Trail and Pioneer Trail, et cetera, who would like that same opportunity. So that being said, I'll shut up. I won't say it again.
As far as okay. I would just have to say that on options 1 and 2, probably 2 might be a little bit better, feel better for the high schools if we were going to do that and pick those 21st century programs. From my perspective, those kids already have a group. They'll be kind of integrated in a 9-12, because see, then you're going to be dealing with such a limited number of kids on the 21st century program side. From that social emotional side, I would want those kids to feel that they're either, a part of that aerospace and engineering program or part of the biotech or, whatever we do at the 4 high schools. I am a little bit concerned about number 1, because I just think that is very limiting to a very top number of kids and could be hurtful to the junior high as well.
Dr. Daniels, on your comments, a couple of things that we also considered as we looked at different proposals in the high school, principals, especially as Gwen just mentioned, looking at proposals and how to provide the opportunity for the most number of kids, because although it would be limited to one area, it would be an opportunity for as many as 270, 300 students. The board last year, when they supported the decision for the 6-9 configuration change, also asked the staff to start looking at some ways to put some things in place, to phase in, to pilot, to implement, whatever word you would like to use, to get a sense of what could be for freshmen. To be able to do it at one site is really a true sense of what the freshmen could do at a high school. And there may, be some considerations that need to be provided if there are freshmen in other areas, or 8th graders actually is who we're talking about, in other areas, and providing access. The space at Northwest right now matches pretty well with the numbers of 8th graders who could potentially come from Prairie Trail, and it matches for the next couple of years. And of course, where things go as far as additions and renovations will determine how long that would last with the enrollment growth in that area. But those were some of the thoughts behind identifying Prairie Trail and Olathe Northwest.
Oh, I think it's very logical. Don't get me wrong. I just don't know that it's fair.
I wonder if we could look at the possibility of, and I think your point is well taken as far as the equity issue, but perhaps we could go a step further if we did in fact decide to move ahead with phase 1 and restrict that to Prairie Trail and Olathe Northwest. If we could then say in year 2, then we're going to look at implementing a similar type of phase-in program at another high school or at all 3 high schools, if that would maybe kind of mitigate that equity issue.
Certainly, you have to recognize, as a group brainstorming in rooms and hassling over this, we talked about equity. And whether we wait until it happens for all students, if the community makes that choice in 4 years or so, or we do it for part of the students. So that's why we thought, and I think Dr. All's guidance of, we brought forth the options, of which have some pros and cons to them. We haven't fleshed out all the details. We've started working on some of them. Certainly, I will say to you, the principals had some preferences in that. Our high school principals receiving these students. They also thought it wasn't very equitable if we had to put caps on in a lottery and we could only take 20 students at Olathe East for 21st century programs because we're already at capacity. So it was very interesting dialogue.
I'm sure.
And I think we have to be cognizant of that while there's certainly merits in this discussion, that at the end of the day, we don't have funding approved for this, and we need to be mindful of that. So we have to be very careful as to how we tread on this.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
If I understand, you're asking for guidance as far as moving forward with these. You're not asking for a definite decision on any one particular one. I would not be able to support anything that did not give parents choice. So that eliminates quite a few of them.
We're all for eliminating some of these choices.
Yeah. I'm also, since you're asking for just some guidance as far as moving forward, as far as exploring them further, we're not approving them one way or another. I agree with Dr. Daniels that I would not look very favorably about doing it at just one site. But that doesn't mean we should close our mind to it. So I guess my proposal would be, as far as giving you guidance, and what I would suggest to the board is that maybe since we've sort of isolated number 3, I would say take a look at move forward with number 3 and either 1 or 2. I'm not sure I have a strong preference one way or another. But so I guess what I'm saying is eliminate the whole second page. That would be my suggestions, is just to explore it and then take one proposal where we look at all 4 high schools also. That would be my suggestion.
I'd agree with that. Although, Stacy, I understand your reasoning and thought process behind one school. I could not support just a pilot at one school. This needs to be, if we go all the way back to the ETC survey, this needs to be an education process for the entire community. That includes all 4 high schools. And then in that regard, I'd only be in favor of number 8.
And I would like serious consideration for number 8. I wanted to know why we were not considering that one also. I would also like to look at, and you may have mentioned this also, Mr. Churchman, that would be number 2, which is the 21st century programs.
Number 2.
Just additional information, at least on the 21st. Those are access to all 4 high schools.
And I agree with that. And in regards to that, I would need to know, we understand that the Northwest and North started with the 21st century programs, and East and South have come on board a little bit behind that, and I'm not so sure that their 21st century programs are as well developed at North and Northwest. So I would want to know what it would look like if we were to follow that at South and East as well, in regards to what would the offerings would be for a ninth grader in their 21st century programs.
As we indicated there, would be identified programs. If the board wants us to move forward with giving you a little bit more information on number 2, we could identify what those programs were and what the number of students that could be handled at the site, and that might help influence your thinking as well.
Number 8, too, if we could look at the potential out, one of the considerations would have to be how long the facilities could hold, at all 4. So that certainly needs to be, let's look at the potential for that also.
Could we look at 2, 3, and 8? It's killing me to say 3, but I would kind of like to know what the cost of it would be. And that way, I think Stacy and Dr. Paz have very, very valid reasons for arguing why 3 is a useful pilot, and I'm not so biased in my thinking that I wouldn't review it. So, but then I think 2 and 8 would reflect options that would be available for all 4 high schools. Is 3 too many to look at? I mean, would that send you over the edge?
If I may, Dr. Daniels, let me, I think I heard I was the only one that spoke in favor of 3, even though I know many of you spoke you're in favor of looking at it further. But I really don't want to waste staff's time if at the end of the day you really don't think you could. Don't do that just for me, because if I don't want to be the only one on here. I don't have any trouble going away from 3 if there's not broader consensus that has a possibility. Because again, I'm sensitive to the resources it takes to do this. I heard a lot about 2 and 8 so far.
Yeah, I would just caveat that, Mr. Gilmore, by saying there's a whole lot more that needs to be known here before I would even qualify as saying that these had possibilities, just from some of the categories that we've discussed.
I think my reason for suggesting 3 would be so that there's a balance of information being provided as to what it would cost in terms of manpower, money, education, recruiting for multi-sites versus one site, and what we could conduct. Okay. I mean, it is a pilot. I think that's fair. And so what can we do efficiently? I mean, if it comes down to that being a rigorous examination that would reflect demographics of students and would reflect parent choice, then I am not so narrow-minded that I couldn't be convinced. But I don't think you can do that unless you look at both.
That's well said.
Personally, I think going down the path of 3 is fraught with many difficulties, because if we do that, it all of a sudden becomes reality, and that's what we're doing. When in fact that's not what we're doing. But the rumor mill will start to fly, and not everybody, but certainly there'll be some people saying, well, the board's going to make that decision, when obviously we haven't. But I don't even think we should go down that path, because I said earlier, I can only support something that works in all 4 high schools, and I'm going to stand firm on that. And I'm don't even want to consider that.
Okay.
And going along with what Mr. Parker said, while I would look at number 3, it would take overwhelming evidence. Okay. So if you're asking Mr. Gilmore whether I would remove it, honoring staff's time, I would probably have to say, yeah, let's limit it to 2, and maybe 2 and 8 that we've suggested. That would be my suggestion.
I suppose that I would offer at this point in time that if we are looking at number 2, does that mean that all of a sudden our 21st century programs are going to become very popular? Mm-hmm.
I'm concerned.
And there could be
certainly one of the concerns that the high school principals talked about.
That's one thing the study will tell us, isn't it?
I think the difficulty of the study, I will say to you, is that unless we are given the opportunity to go out and offer to folks, we could potentially maybe going to do this, and so we get actual numbers. We are going to be providing you something similar to what the business department would, and that is a model based on the fact that we can handle 20 students in environmental design at Olathe East, because, we have to add them over 9th, 10th, 11th, so they're going to be there a little bit longer. So we determine we can take 20 students, 15 students, and then we'll have to answer to you whether that be cost effective, can the building handle it, how long it can handle it. But again, we're just going to have to assume that all 15 slots would be taken. We have to use something. On number 3, we would have to use, if we did not go out and ask parents, we're going to have to say, based on 50% of the class going and 50% not going, this is what it might look like. So we'd have to limit our number of models. But again, without asking people, since choice is a high priority, we're going to be kind of guessing a little bit. But we certainly can come back to you with what we believe the identified programs are for 21st century and how many number of can be handled. We can bring back to you some information on if it was 50-50, would it be cost effective for number 3? Again, I would also mention a tiny little line here on the board report about pre-enrollment and timeline and good planning and being efficient, because you recognize many of these, some of these options might impact some staffing. So a 9th grade teacher might be looking to go up to the high school to teach freshman English. So there's some other challenges with, but not things that we haven't talked about, but we would want to bring at least something more definitive, but it will only be a model if we are not asking people. We can look in our crystal ball.
A couple comments I might add. I think the discussion tonight, from my perspective, is a good discussion because, part of this discussion was looking at different options. I know the Bond Task Force did that. It's balancing how do you get freshmen more opportunities, how do you do it equitably, how do you do it cost efficiently. And, I think looking at these different options has been very good because it's reinforced for me that it's hard to do some of these things with our current high school facilities. And one of the things you will hear from me January 10th that might help bring these two things together is that if we can identify 2 or 3 of these to get more information on a model, since there may be some board interest, we will do that to bring back January 10th. And then my intent also on January 10th, our next board meeting, would be to outline a proposed plan for moving forward on the 6-9 reconfiguration. And with that, I can tell you that one of the things I've been exploring with Mr. Thomason and other staff and working with high school principals on is that one of the challenges we have right now in our high schools is that they're designed with an infrastructure and programming and electives, for our model, and that our renovation, which I think sometimes got kind of maybe overlooked in our discussion last year for the 4 high schools in our list with Mr. Thomason, I think there was some kind of sense that we would just add on a wing and just put 9th grade in there, which in fact, each high school can be enhanced for all kids and all staff for the long-term future of this district by strategically having a plan that's unique to each high school. And one of the challenges we're going to have is that by limiting in certain programs, it's just that particular school, maybe it's east in fine arts, and maybe it's south in science, and maybe it's north in languages. There's some tweaking that has to be there based on some enrollment patterns we have as well. So, we can come back with a couple of these options more fleshed out and see if we can move forward on that. At the same time, I want to talk a little bit more about what we can do to make these high schools ready to provide additional opportunities for all of our freshmen.
So I've heard 2, 3, and 8. Dr. Banacassi, I hope that provides you all with direction.
Thank you.
Okay.
I want it clear that this is a pilot, and it is a pilot, And we haven't decided anything, and especially as regards to number 3, because I already had contacts about when are at Northwest, when are the 9th graders going over there. So, see, that's what the rumor mill is working here, and we need to be very, very clear that it's studying, and nobody's made a decision on this yet.
And I think that will come more clear with Dr. All's communication plan, because we certainly have individuals that don't always hear all of what's happening.
Thank you, ladies. Section 9 of our agenda is information items.
Mr. Gilmore, I've given some reflection on one of these, and I'd like to go back to that, which is 8.07, full-day kindergarten.
Go ahead, Mr. Parker.
I heard what Dawn and Ms. Schempel said tonight, and I want to listen to that, and I think we should listen to that as a board. And I went back to the November meeting, and we're talking about $617,000 savings here. $617,000 reallocation. If we went to this kind of thing, what I would like to have is some more detailed information in regards to the 3 levels that we have here. All we have are the levels, and some good points were made tonight about what kind of hardship, what's that going to cause to families? What are we expecting in regards to how much the fee would be, what level it would be when they would be eligible for that fee, because this is pretty general here. So I need specifics in regards to, for instance, on level 3. I don't understand what families qualifying for HUD moderate income that it would pay 80% of FBK fees. I don't know what that means in terms of real dollars to families. So would need to know that before I would be ready to make a decision on this. And I would imagine this is going to be an action item in January.
One of the things that I will work with staff on is probably coming back with a couple of options on what sliding scale looks like. I mean, we can take, I think what's proposed there, and I think I asked this question of Mr. Mark, 80% of the HUD model is the model that's used in other entities as the next level beyond free and reduced price. And we'll put dollar figures to that based on our current fees, but we could do the math on that. And then we may want to look at another model that has a deeper reduction and look at that across all the schools. This is a tough issue. In my mind, it's not about saving money. This is not about saving money. And I think what we're looking at is how do we bring that full-day kindergarten experience to all parents who have resource needs across the district and children that have academic needs. One of my questions that we haven't had a chance to talk about, there is another line there that says children that have academic needs will be scholarship. We're going to have to look at developing some criteria for that going forward, because otherwise there's no way to distinguish that from somebody. What is the criteria? And I think that's the part that needs more definition on our part. So we need to do more work on this before we bring this back to you for action, and we recognize that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Parker.
And so I had one more. on 8.06, I noticed that's at the track usage thing, and I was disturbed a little bit that we would charge admission to that. And I understand, that some track team would sponsor that.